Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into soft candlelight and the whisper of silk slippers along polished floors, as we enter the gilded realm of Versailles, not to storm it, mind you, but to nap somewhere near its most romantic corners. We're following the flirtations, the coded glances, and the fan-flick diplomacy of courtiers who wore corsets tighter than their secrets, and powdered their hair with such commitment it's a wonder anyone could recognize them twice in a row. You're about to be a guest at the most delicately scandalous party in Europe, though you'll probably be asleep before the first strawberry is stolen from the dessert tray. You probably won't survive this corset, but in a good way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrived by coach, or so your dream seems to say. It's the kind of coach that creaks apologetically and smells like lemon soap and secrets. The wheels crunch softly over the gravel circle leading to the side entrance of the Palace of Versailles, not the main hall. No, we're not storming the throne room tonight. We're slipping in through the edges, into the glow of a side chamber already echoing with laughter and the faint clink of glasses being raised. You're dressed somehow for the part. No idea how that happened. Dream logic. A deep sapphire gown with embroidered silver moons, or perhaps a velvet coat lined with discreetly flirtatious embroidery, somewhere near your wrist, a miniature rose stitched upside down, which we'll get to later. The candles are beeswax. They drip elegantly. Nothing at Versailles happens without some flair of elegance, even decay. As you step into the corridor, your feet feel the difference in pressure as the floor transitions from gravel to stone to something impossibly polished, like marble that's been flattered into submission. A few powdered wigs tilt as you pass, friendly enough. They know you're new, but you've got the right posture. That helps. Court life, as it turns out, is less about shouting and more about soft declarations. Here, everything's suggestion. You glance into a side room. A man and a woman are mid-conversation, though neither is speaking. He lifts his fan to his cheek. She responds by slightly tilting hers downward. The entire affair seems deeply meaningful and also completely incomprehensible. You make a mental note to study up on fan language. The room you're being ushered into is low-lit and heavy with perfume. But not the kind you'd find in a shop today. This is perfume that knows it came from crushed petals, distilled tears, and an entire summer's worth of stolen glances. Lavender mingles with bergamot, and somewhere near the center of the room, someone's wearing something that smells exactly like last Tuesday, after midnight, on a balcony. You find your place, guided by a servant whose expression suggests they know 17 more things than they'll ever tell you. The chair is cushioned with gold-threaded damask, and your fingers automatically smooth your attire, even though there's no wrinkle in sight. Now begins what historians have kindly not documented well enough, the opening volley of Versailles flirtation. It starts with candles. Or more accurately, with how one navigates their own candle. Everyone at the table has one. Some are thin and elegant, meant to accentuate fingers. Others are stubby and charming, the kind of candle that says I'm witty but not too serious. Your candle is somewhere in between. Warm. Modest. A bit indecisive. You notice across the table, someone is leaning ever so slightly into their candlelight, letting the glow paint their cheekbones and cast thoughtful shadows beneath their eyes. This is a practice move. You decide to try it, and immediately sneeze as a curl of wax smoke touches your nose. Gracefully, of course. There's a murmur of laughter. It's not cruel. It's the kind of laugh that says, "We've all been there," followed by, "But we're glad it was you and not us tonight." You recover. You sip something honeyed and ambiguous from a delicate cup with a chipped rim that somehow feels like a wink from the universe. Someone to your left leans in to whisper, "It's spiced plum cordial." Or possibly basil wine. No one's been sure since last summer's labeling incident. You nod, sip again, and find that it tastes like secrets soaked in fruit. This, you realize, is Versailles courtship in its earliest stages, not declarations, but gestures. Not bold confessions, but shared sips, scented glances, a hand brushing a ribbon as if by accident. A ballroom may later host the dramatic steps of a minuet or a gavotte, but here, now, in the candlelit hush of early evening, the game is just beginning. A gloved hand adjusts a sleeve. A painted nail traces the rim of a goblet. A curl is tucked not for vanity, but for subtle communication. Everything is a signal. Nothing is admitted. Historians still argue whether any of it truly meant anything, or if it was all simply performance, ritual for the sake of ritual. But sitting here, with candlelight flickering on lace cuffs and the slow shift of powdered shoulders leaning just close enough to suggest intent, you begin to suspect that even if it was performance, it was a delicious one. And frankly, a little part of you is thrilled to be in it. As the evening stretches, and laughter turns slightly slower, you catch a look, a real one, across the table. No fan. No handkerchief. Just eyes meeting yours, and a soft smile. That's your cue. You reach for your goblet, not to drink, but to lift it just so. Your wrist tilts slightly, letting the candlelight catch the rose embroidery near your cuff. A simple gesture, but one that, as you now understand, means, yes, I see you too. The goblet returns to its perch on the table, but the message has been sent. Your embroidered signal, delicate, deliberate, settles into the air like a shared secret suspended over plum-scented steam. The other smile grows just a touch. Not wide, not daring, but knowing. And that's the thing about Versailles courtship. It always knows, even when it pretends not to. Tonight is not a ball. There will be no formal dancing, no fanfare with trumpets and grand entrances. No, tonight is the quieter ritual, an evening salon where everything speaks softly, where attraction happens not with a kiss but with the rearrangement of seating. Across the room, 2 chairs are moved an inch closer together. That's practically scandalous. You shift your gaze, letting your eyes rest on the fabrics that spill from every person's form, velvets and twilight hues, silks that sigh with movement. The corset you wear, or endure, depending on your posture, is laced just tight enough to remind you of your spine but not so tight as to silence breath. That was the art, really. Wearing one not as punishment, but as punctuation. There's a theory, one debated in scholarly circles even now, that corsets were less about submission and more about control. Not of the women wearing them, necessarily, but of their narrative. The more tightly you were laced, the more precisely you could shape how others saw you. A physical sentence structure in lace and bone. As you settle back against your chair, you feel the pull of yours, a subtle tension, like being held by a poem written in satin ribbon. Across the room, a conversation blooms into a gentle crescendo of laughter. Not belly laughs, of course. Versailles laughter rarely ventures beyond the mouth. This is more of a flirtation masquerading as amusement. The sort of laugh you'd bottle if you could, wearing it as perfume later. Someone offers a tray of sweet pastries, impossibly small and annoyingly delightful. You select one with sugared violet on top, and the person holding the tray nods, their eyebrows lifting just slightly. The message is clear: good choice. The pastry tastes like air that decided to become dessert. To your left, a woman with impeccable posture is explaining, mostly with her hands, why she finds powdered blue hair completely inappropriate before September. Her companion listens, eyes twinkling, as if he entirely agrees but cannot resist the temptation to disagree. This is another layer of Versailles flirtation, contradiction as courtship. If someone claims orange gloves are only suitable in winter, one must counter with the defense of spring citrus. It's not about fashion, it's about attention. Conversation is fencing match, every retort another lunge. You watch as your friend across the room, yes, we're calling them your friend now, leans closer to someone else, listens politely, but looks over the speaker's shoulder directly at you. The glance is casual, but the meaning is anything but. A candle pops beside you, its flame dancing slightly to the right. One of the footmen glides over with practiced ease and shields it briefly with a silver snuffer. Not to extinguish, just to rebalance the flicker. That's what tonight is. A rebalancing of flickers. Your corset creaks as you shift slightly, posture immaculate. You run a gloved finger along the edge of your glass, the friction humming like a secret harp string. The room tilts just a little, or maybe it's your imagination, buoyed by syrupy cordial and the whispered giggle of someone just behind a curtain. You rise. Not dramatically, just enough to stretch your legs, and of course to allow your embroidered cuff to catch the candlelight again. That motif? A rose upside down? It was popularized, oddly enough, by a lesser-known duchess who reportedly used the symbol to say, "I bloom only in the dark." No one knows if that's true, mind you. Historians still argue whether she even existed. But the motif endured. You wander toward a cluster of people gently arguing about whether satin ribbons should be worn knotted to the left or right if one is serious about someone. The debate is spirited, mostly ridiculous, and entirely the kind of nonsense you're starting to find delightful. Left, apparently, is for longing. Right is for readiness. Both, at once, is said to be tragically confusing. You, of course, are wearing none. That's the mystery. Someone asks where you found your embroidery. You deflect with a playful shrug. Someone else leans in to whisper, "You've been watched all evening." He hasn't looked away once. You don't ask who. You already know. That's another skill you're developing rapidly, Versailles intuition. It's like muscle memory for suggestion. No one says what they mean, but they do mean everything they say. As you move toward the fireplace, its glow casts silhouettes across the velvet drapes. The flames reflect in several polished buttons, golden embroidery, and the discreet glint of a hairpin shaped like a crescent moon. Details matter here. A misplaced accessory can start a rumor. A well-placed one can start a night. You settle into a chaise, careful of your skirts or coat tails, and lean just slightly to the left, longing, apparently, based on recent ribbon scholarship. Your friend finds their way to a nearby settee. Not too nearby. There's always a buffer of plausible deniability. But close enough to count your blinks. The two of you sit there, framed in the warm hush of candlelight, sharing nothing more than proximity, and an unbearable number of near glances. Eventually, someone strikes up a quiet game of forfeits in the corner. You hear the gentle chaos of teasing, mild scandal, and someone shrieking over a wrongly guessed riddle. It's background music, like the clinking of crystal or the rustle of heavy skirts against parquet. You feel your pulse slowing, not because of fatigue, but because your body has acclimated to the rhythm of Versailles, the slow dance of signals, the careful choreography of desire and restraint. You glance once more toward your friend, who, without looking, mirrors your movement. This is the language here. Not words. Not touches. Just mirrored breathing. And candlelight. The game in the corner has escalated to mild hilarity. Someone has been dared to recite a poem using only compliments aimed at a stranger's shoes. You catch a verse drifting through the air, something about leather shaped like sin and salvation. It's all so absurdly poetic that you can't help but smile, though only slightly. Any more and people might think you're too available. Because here, smiles are currency. You lean back on your chaise, letting the velvet cradle your spine, your corset supporting and gently constraining like a well-trained gossip. Your fan, yes, you have one now, rests in your lap. Ivory with lace insets, painted delicately with a scene of swans and forget-me-nots. The sort of fan that says, "I know how to keep a secret, but I might hint at it anyway." Fan etiquette is its own language, and you're beginning to pick it up without translation. A flick open means you're intrigued. A quick flutter? Disinterest. Tap on the left cheek? Yes, I'd like to be courted. Tap on the right? I'm terribly amused, but no thank you. Of course, all of this assumes you're holding it correctly. Last week, one duchess reportedly insulted 3 people and invited a duel, all by resting her fan upside down. Historians still argue whether that was truly accidental, or the cleverest act of social sabotage the Queen's Salon ever saw. You practice a flick. It's elegant. Controlled. You catch your friend glancing your way again, but this time they're not pretending to look elsewhere. They're watching your hands. You reward them with a slow draw of your finger along the fan's carved edge. Just once. Just enough. And then you ignore them completely. Because that's how the game is played. You turn instead toward the chaise beside you where a gentleman, no, a marquis, judging by the elaborate embroidery of a fox playing a lute across his sleeve, is waxing lyrical about scented gloves. The trick, he explains, holding up a pair with practiced flair, is to rub lavender inside the seams before stitching. That way, the scent emerges only when the fingers warm. You nod appreciatively, inhaling faintly. He's right. They smell like late summer evenings and the pages of a love letter never sent. It turns out gloves are even more coated than fans. A glove slipped to the floor might mean, I want to see you tomorrow. Returned glove? Only in a dream. Removed and dropped on purpose? Scandalous. Like proposing in front of soup. The Marquis leans in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Of course, there's the glove duel ritual, too. You raise an eyebrow, inviting the story. Well, he says, voice dropping to a hush fit for bedtime confessions, if someone insults your honor, or your taste in brocade, which is frankly the same thing, you may challenge them to a duel by slapping their face with a glove. But, he raises a gloved finger. If the glove is scented, it counts as a flirtation. You blink slowly. What if the scent is garlic? He grins. Then it's a threat and an insult. Very efficient. You laugh, genuinely now. Your friend across the room hears and tilts their head ever so slightly, as if they've just discovered something new about you. The room has shifted its tone again. The candles are burning lower, golden wax pooling in crystal holders. Shadows stretch farther. The music, harpsichord perhaps, has faded to a background hum, replaced by murmurs and drifting verses from the poetry game, which has evolved into something far less coherent and far more charming. A lady in a shimmering lilac gown tiptoes between groups, leaving behind a trail of rose petals. No one questions her. She might be sleepwalking. Or she might be making a point. At Versailles, those are often the same thing. Your fan now rests half open, signaling I might say yes if you ask the right question. But no one asks? Not yet. You rise again, this time slowly. You don't announce it. There are no declarations at Versailles salons. You simply glide, because there is no other acceptable verb, toward the large window seat draped in silk cushions. You settle there like a story about to be told. It's then that your friend appears beside you, silently, like a well-planned coincidence. They don't sit. Not yet. Instead, they hover just out of reach, eyes flicking down to your fan, then to your fingers, and then back up to your lips, not rudely. More like a cartographer trying to read an especially detailed map. Finally, they offer something, a small, folded card with your name on the outside. Well, not your actual name. Just an initial. But it's unmistakably for you. You open it carefully. Inside is a single sentence, written in impeccable calligraphy. Shall we walk beneath the candle trees? Candle trees, of course, are not literal trees. They're iron candelabra mounted on tall spires, planted among the trimmed hedgerows of Versailles outer garden paths. Lit only on special nights. Nights like this. You nod once, and the note disappears back into a gloved palm like a magic trick. You both leave the room with practiced casualness. No one says goodbye. That would be far too direct. But one or two glances trail behind you, perhaps a few whispers exchanged under fans that flutter like sleepy butterflies. Outside, the air is silk smooth and perfumed faintly with lilac and last week's rain. The gravel path crunches softly underfoot as you enter the garden. The candle trees flicker ahead, glowing trunks of soft firelight, each casting gold halos onto ivy-covered stone and sculpted hedges. Your friend walks beside you, not touching, but close enough that you feel their warmth, even through layers of lace and decorum. Neither of you speaks. Because that's not what this walk is for. This is the unspoken part. And in Versailles, sometimes the silence says everything. The path ahead is lined with soft pools of golden light, each one casting silhouettes of delicate curls, feathered hats, and fluted brocade sleeves as you pass. Even the gravel seems to hush beneath your shoes, like it knows this is no ordinary stroll. It's a kind of whispered ceremony, conducted not with vows but with lingering glances and velvet shadows. You and your companion walk side by side, the silence between you thick with intention. A breeze carries the faint scent of beeswax, lemon verbena, and something fainter still, maybe jasmine, maybe mischief. It could be either. The trees sway overhead, tall and carefully shaped into architectural perfection. You trail your fingers along the trimmed hedges, leaves cool and waxy beneath your gloves. Each one is clipped to a royal standard, but tonight, they feel like centuries guarding something more delicate than gold, the soft thrum of shared attention. You glance sideways. Your friend is watching the candlelight ripple across the path, but you know, without needing to ask, that they're also listening. Every breath you take, every shift of silk, is another sentence in this strange, wordless dialogue. Eventually, you come upon a marble bench under a wrought iron arch. Ivy climbs it in lazy spirals, and here, the candles burn lower, smaller, more secretive. You sit. Your friend does too, this time close enough that your skirts, if you're wearing skirts, just brush. Or perhaps it's your coat hem that flutters slightly and finds the edge of theirs. Either way, the touch is subtle. An echo rather than an event. Do you believe, they murmur, in courtship as choreography? You look at them for the first time in full shadowed candlelight and reply, only if the dance leaves room for improvisation. They smile, genuinely now, and lean back against the cool marble. There's a story, they say, of a countess who used to choreograph her suitors like ballroom partners. She'd assign roles for the night based on the embroidery on their sleeves. You raise an eyebrow. And if they wore no embroidery? They were spectators, not participants. The idea is ridiculous. It's also perfectly plausible. Historians still argue whether she was real or an invention of the pamphlet writers who prowled Versailles, eager for scandal but too well-mannered to print anything outright accusatory. And so they invented metaphors, veils for gossip, stories disguised as cautionary tales. Still, you imagine the countess, fanning herself while assessing a man's sleeve for courtship potential. That fox-loop marquis from earlier might have scored quite well. The breeze shifts, lifting the edge of your friend's hair or collar, just enough to send a waft of scent your way. Something warm and musky, spice like cinnamon left too long on the tongue. You don't look over. You just breathe in, slowly. It's here, in this quiet nook, that you notice the tiniest sound, the rustle of paper. Your friend produces another card. No envelope this time, just folded parchment with the edges still warm from their pocket. You accept it. Inside is a line of poetry. Not famous. Not quite polished. Something original, you think. It reads, "The flame that flickers nearest you forgets it ever feared the dark." You don't say anything. Not because there's nothing to say, but because some things should be answered in silence. So instead, you return the note, folded again. Tucked delicately into the space between your gloved fingers and your fan. It's not a promise. It's just placement. The conversation moves softly from poetry to perfume. Your friend mentions the trend of blending tonka bean with ambergris, a pairing supposedly so persuasive it once led to 2 duels in the same evening. You counter with the rumor that the Queen's perfumer trained by scenting the insides of hollowed books, reading only when each chapter matched his mood. He reportedly got to the end of Ovid in a week of pomegranate and crushed violet. You laugh together at the absurdity of it, though secretly, you wonder how that would smell. Warm ink and violets? Yes, you'd read that. A soft sound pulls your attention. From beyond the hedge comes a brief trill of laughter, someone else wandering, perhaps, or a midnight game of shadow tag among the orange trees. Not uncommon in Versailles. The palace is known for its spontaneous entertainment. A few years ago, someone staged a dramatic reading of tragic love letters using only pastry chefs as actors. It was, by all reports, deeply moving and completely incomprehensible. You wonder what story you're in now. Whether your walk through candlelight will be recounted later as romantic intrigue, as social maneuvering, or simply as one of those Versailles curiosities, like wigs made of spun glass or duels fought over the correct pronunciation of meringue. The air cools. You feel it through the silk at your wrist, along the top of your shoulders where the embroidery ends. It's not unpleasant. In fact, it seems to nudge you gently towards something, either back toward the salon or deeper into the garden. Your friend looks toward the darker path. The one with fewer candles, fewer witnesses. They don't ask. They just rise, offer their arm, bent at just the right angle, as if rehearsed, and wait. You consider. The night is still young, or old, depending on your philosophy. Your corset hasn't quite begun its protest. And the promise of further candle trees, flickering like curious stars, is tempting. You take the arm. And the walk begins again. This time, slower. No words. Just the rhythm of breath, the whisper of fabric, and the occasional crunch of gravel beneath shoes that know how to keep secrets. The deeper garden path is quieter, less sculpted than the grand walkways. Here, candle trees give way to single sconces tucked discreetly behind ivy-covered trellises and beside mossy statues of half-forgotten gods. The light isn't designed to impress, it's designed to suggest. Everything glows in golds and soft grays, as if the garden itself is undecided whether it's real or just a very well-rehearsed dream. You and your companion drift forward, slower now, unhurried. There's no need to speak. The gravel underfoot provides rhythm enough, soft, uneven, occasionally crunching with the same satisfying crackle as a fresh croissant crust. Ahead, a marble nymph leans coyly over a pool, her features worn smooth by centuries of whispered wishes and possibly bored pigeons. Her gaze seems to follow you, or perhaps she's simply caught in that eternal, seductive pose that just happened to be looking your way. Look. A classic. Your companion, sensing the statue's mood, offers a low chuckle. She looks like she knows every courtship secret and plans to keep them all. You nod. Or sell them to the highest bidder. Or trade them for a decent glass of Madeira and a sympathetic ear. You both laugh again, softly, lazily. It's the kind of laughter that doesn't try to prove anything. It just lets itself be. A little further along, you reach an alcove of climbing roses. They're out of season, of course, but Versailles has ways of bending time to its aesthetic whims. A few stubborn blooms still cling to the trellis like whispered rumors, perfuming the air with something too subtle to name, but impossible to ignore. You pause beneath them, letting the petals frame you like a portrait that hasn't been painted yet. Do you know about the rose thread game? Your companion asks, voice dipped in candlelight and curiosity. You raise an eyebrow. Not yet. They begin, that in some salons, ladies would pull a single red thread from the hem of their gown, a thread touched with rose oil, just barely, and tie it to a fan, or a glove, or sometimes even to the handle of a teacup. You follow this, fascinated. Then they'd pass that item to someone without a word. If the person noticed the thread and untied it, the lady would offer them a dance later that evening. If they didn't, your companion shrugs. Well, a thread is easy to miss. Dignity preserved. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or just a particularly poetic anecdote recorded in the diary of a very theatrical footman. But you like the idea. Your companion continues, of course, if two people each tried the thread trick at the same time, chaos. One salon ended up with half the guests knotted together like a tapestry. You let your fingers trail along your sleeve, not quite pulling a thread, but letting one catch on the tip of your glove. For no reason. Or maybe a reason. The wind stirs the ivy. A shadow moves beyond a hedge, just a servant, probably, checking lanterns or fetching another tray of absurdly tiny desserts. You remember hearing that someone once tried to woo a duchess using only candied violets shaped like Latin verbs. It failed. But he did become a very successful baker afterward. Versailles is full of such strange beginnings. Your companion gestures to a narrow stone stair tucked behind the rose trellis. This way? You nod. Why not? The steps lead down to a quieter part of the grounds, the water theater. It's not really a theater, at least not anymore. Originally designed to host performances with fountains timed to music, it now sleeps in silence, its fountains dry for the night. But the marble benches still remain, set in a half-moon around an empty basin that once shimmered with candlelight and soft splashes. You take a seat at the edge, your skirts, or coat, or cloak, spilling gently over the stone. Your companion sits beside you, but not too close. Not yet. The sky above is starless, blanketed in a light mist that softens the edges of everything. The candlelight from above reflects faintly off the marble, giving the illusion that the basin glows from within, like it remembers every performance ever held here. Every whispered confession. Every promise never meant to last past midnight. Your companion breaks the silence again. Some say the basin was once used for a game called Echo's Whisper. You turn your head. I've never heard of it. That's the point, they grin. It was only played once. You wait, expectantly. They say a group of courtiers, all poets of course, gathered one night to tell the most poetic lie they could think of. But instead of speaking, they each whispered their lie into the dry basin. Then they waited to see which one echo would return. You smile. And? The next morning, a single sentence echoed back from the stone. I never thought of you once. You let out a low breath. Ouch. But the winner received a rose from the Queen's private garden, your companion adds. So. Worth it. You both fall silent again, the kind of silence that wraps itself around you like a shawl. It's not absence, it's presence. Unspoken, full enough. A breeze brushes across your cheek. Your fan rests in your lap, unmoved. For once, no signals are needed. Your hand shifts slightly, just enough to brush the back of theirs. They don't pull away. Instead, their pinky finger curls, ever so subtly, over yours. No vows. No declarations. Just a fingertip, saying what neither of you quite dares. The garden holds its breath. The air smells faintly of jasmine and history. And somewhere, far off, a nightingale sings exactly one note. You both listen, as if the song was meant for you. The nightingale's single note seems to echo into the spaces between the stars, though perhaps that's just the acoustics of the water theater. Everything here feels designed to carry secrets, marble and mist working in tandem to make whispers last longer than they should. You sit still, fingers barely touching, the shared quiet stretching out into something nearly sacred. There is something about stillness that courts at Versailles never quite learned. They valued movement, of fans, of eyebrows, of lace cuffs fluttering just so. And yet, here in this moment, it's the quiet that speaks. Your companion finally says, have you ever heard of the fan duel? You glance sideways. The what now? A salon game. Two people would sit opposite one another with closed fans. On a signal, they'd both open their fans and begin a silent argument using only the gestures from the courtly fan language. You imagine it instantly flicks, snaps, slow sweeps. Fan tilted over heart? I love you. Fan resting on right cheek? Yes. Left cheek? No. Open and closed again in rapid succession? You're being quite inappropriate. The aristocracy turned even restraint into performance art. Historians still argue whether the game began as flirtation, political satire, or a passive-aggressive tool for duchesses who'd run out of witty insults. Some say the Queen once mediated a particularly vicious fan duel in which two ladies accidentally conveyed 6 conflicting proposals of marriage within 3 minutes. Did anyone win? You ask. No idea, your companion says with a shrug. One of them ended up pregnant though. You laugh, the sound bouncing softly off the stone walls. Your companion's eyes crinkle with amusement, and you can't help but think how very unscandalous scandal can feel when it's told in candlelight, with just the right hint of powdered sarcasm. As the air grows cooler, you both rise and drift onward, this time along a narrower path, the foliage thicker and more overgrown. Here, Versailles relaxes. It drops some of its formality, lets the trees tangle just a little, allows the marble to moss at the edges. It's where the wild things would be, if wild things wore waistcoats and embroidered slippers. Ahead, you come upon a stone bench shaded by overhanging lilac branches. They're not in bloom, wrong season again, but some gardener has hidden sachets of dried blossoms beneath the bench. You know because when you sit, the scent rises faintly, familiar, calming, almost like old letters pressed between pages of a forgotten book. Have you ever read a glove message? Your companion asks. You blink. Like a note left in a glove? Sort of. At court, Gloves themselves were often used as messages. The kind of leather, the stitching, even how they were scented, it could all mean something. You glanced at your own gloves, half expecting them to whisper a secret about you. There was this trend, they continue, where lovers would exchange gloves as tokens. Not worn ones, new ones specially made. Lined with silk if it was love. Unlined if it was lust. Scented with rosemary for remembrance. Or lavender, if you were hoping they'd forget everything that happened after the wine. You chuckle again, unable to help yourself. They'd embroider initials into the lining where no one else could see them, your companion adds. And if someone kissed your glove rather than your hand, it meant they wanted more than conversation. You try not to think about how many gloves must have been kissed at Versailles. Historians, for their part, are divided. Some claim the glove codes were wildly exaggerated, popularized by pamphlet writers hoping to scandalize the lower classes with tales of aristocratic naughtiness. Others insist that the glove gestures were meticulously recorded in etiquette manuals, listed right alongside how to sit on a chair without causing political offense. You imagine that manual. Section 1. Chair Diplomacy for Beginners. Section 2. Glove Etiquette for Complicated Courtships. Beside you, your companion gently removes one glove and sets it in your lap without comment. You look down. It's soft suede, pale as cream, with just a single line of blue embroidery along the wrist. No initials. But the stitching has been done by hand. Carefully. You lift it slightly, just enough to catch the faintest scent, clove, maybe, or something spiced that clings to fabric the way memory clings to song lyrics you haven't heard in years. No explanation is given. None is needed. Instead, the two of you walk again, slowly, toward a wrought iron arch that marks the entrance to a secluded courtyard. You step through together, and suddenly the garden changes. Here, everything is round. Curved benches. Circular fountains. Even the lanterns hang from looping vines that spiral gently toward the center. This was once called the Court of Echoes, not for its sound, but for its repetitions. Lovers would meet here, intentionally mimicking one another's gestures, creating a sort of silent duet of posture and pause. The idea was that harmony in movement suggested harmony Indiana. Other things. You and your companion sit at opposite sides of a curved bench. They lean forward slightly. You lean forward slightly. They remove their second glove. You, without looking down, adjust the glove in your lap. They raise one brow. You raise one shoulder. And just like that, you're playing Echo's game. No rules, just imitation. And beneath the candle glow and moonwash, it feels more real than any scripted court performance ever could. Eventually, you both lean back. The bench creaks gently beneath the weight of mirrored thought. This is the best part of courtship, your companion says softly. The middle. Not the beginning with all its uncertainty, not the end with all its declarations. Just the middle. Where everything could mean something. You nod. Or nothing. Exactly, they murmur. And that's the fun of it. A nearby lantern flickers. Not out of wind, it's too still for that, but perhaps out of respect. Or exhaustion. You wonder how many games like this were played here. How many flirtations died here, and how many began again. The marble remembers, you think. The vines definitely do. And as you both sit in silence, mirroring stillness now, it occurs to you. There is something delicious about almost. About gestures left halfway. About lips that pause a breath before a word. About a glove that lingers just a little too long in someone else's lap. The quiet of the Court of Echoes lingers long after you both rise, a silence that trails behind like the hem of a velvet gown, gently brushing the marble, reminding you it was there. You and your companion wander through a corridor of sculpted greenery now, a leafy gallery of arched hedges with small inset statues peeking out like gossiping spectators frozen mid-scandal. It's the kind of path designed for slow steps, wayward glances, and the occasional stolen sigh. As the candlelight shifts and flickers above, casting long twin shadows of you both onto the gravel, your companion glances sideways. Have you ever seen a lace letter? They ask casually, as if one might stumble across such a thing in the dessert drawer. You tilt your head. A what? Oh, they were all the rage during Madame de Pompadour's peak influence, they say, voice slipping into that storyteller tone so common in salons after the second glass of cordial. A letter embroidered onto lace, no ink, just thread. Sent folded in a fan or tucked beneath a glove. The more delicate the lace, the more risque the message. You picture it instantly, silken script hidden among patterns of roses and vines, only legible to the trained, or truly determined, eye. Were they ever read aloud? You ask. Only once, your companion grins. And the entire salon had to be cleared for blushing recovery. Historians still argue whether lace letters were a genuine communication method or an elaborate prank invented by bored duchesses with too many embroidery needles and not enough eligible suitors. There are preserved examples in a few museums, yes, but oddly enough, most of them spell out baking recipes or harmless poetry. The scandalous ones, if they ever existed, have long since dissolved like sugar on the tongue. You pause beneath a trellis where honeysuckle vines curl with romantic disregard for architectural symmetry. One petal brushes your cheek, uninvited but not unwelcome. Would you write a lace letter? Your companion asks. You smirk. Only if I could include footnotes. They laugh, a warm sound, and the air around you seems to soften in response. The path leads now toward a small chamber off the garden, an octagonal folly with domed ceilings and cushions lining the walls. Once used as a private reading room, or so they say. Though between you and me, it looks suspiciously designed for the kind of literature you can't check out from a library. Inside, the scent of sandalwood lingers faintly in the upholstery. Someone has recently lit a few sticks of incense, subtle, smoky, like parchment just beginning to curl. On a pedestal in the center of the room rests a single quill and an inkpot. You know what this is, don't you? Your companion says, voice dropped to that nearly whisper that means something delightfully inappropriate is about to be discussed under the guise of history. You raise an eyebrow. This is a boudoir writing room, they say, where letters of invitation were composed. Not invitations to dinner or duels. The other kind. Ah. You step closer, and the quill really is lovely, goose feather, pale ivory, trimmed so fine you imagine the words it writes would be elegant no matter what they say. It was considered poor form, they continue, to write such a letter with ordinary ink. Too obvious. Instead, one used rosewater mixed with crushed lavender petals. Sometimes saffron. If you really wanted to make an impression. You nod slowly. And did they sign them? Never. That was part of the game. There's something delicious about anonymous flirtation, especially when both parties are absolutely sure who the other is. Like wearing a mask that only obscures your identity in theory, but still gives you permission to be bold. You pick up the quill, twirl it lightly between your fingers, and pretend to write. If the moonlight feels too lonely, meet me by the fountain with the broken cherub at midnight. Wear blue. Or don't. I'll know. Your companion watches, amused. Should I be worried you're that good at this? They ask. You offer a smile. Only if you're wearing blue. I might be, they murmur. The moment stretches, not tense, just elastic. Like taffy. Or a very well-fitted corset at the end of a long evening, ready to give, but only just. Back outside, the night has thickened. The stars are still modestly veiled by mist, but the gardens are brighter now, lanterns having been lit on more paths. Perhaps others are out wandering too. Versailles does not sleep easily. It tosses and turns, full of whispered intrigues and perfumes clinging to velvet curtains. You find yourselves on a balcony now, overlooking the Grand Canal. Below, small boats drift lazily, pushed not by oars but by servants guiding them from the banks with long poles. Court couples ride them like gondolas, wrapped in conversation, or perhaps in total silence, each moment gilded by the candlelight floating on water. There's a bench at the railing. You sit, shoulder to shoulder now, not bothering with glove etiquette or posture performance. The breeze is cooler here, and your companion casually drapes a portion of their cloak over your knees. No big declaration. Just a shared warmth. Did you know, they say, That the color of your fan's tassel once indicated how far into the evening you were willing to go? You blink. You're joking. Not at all. White meant conversation. Pink meant dancing. Red meant, let's not talk about it on a family-friendly channel. You grin. And what about no tassel? That meant very different things depending on the region. In Versailles? Likely just fashion. In Venice? Let's just say someone would follow up. Historians still debate whether the tassel code was widespread or just a series of coincidental misunderstandings embroidered into legend. But even the possibility gives you something to glance at during a slow salon gathering. Your companion leans on the railing beside you, staring out at the glimmering canal. It's strange, isn't it? How much effort went into not saying what people really meant. You nod. And how thrilling that made it. They turn, just slightly, their sleeve brushing yours. And how little has changed. You don't answer. You don't need to. Instead, you both look out over the candle-flecked water, letting silence speak for a while. The quill room. The glove. The glances. A fan with no tassel. A moment held, like breath before a kiss. Or the pause before signing a letter you'll never send. History doesn't always repeat. But it does echo, softly, like footsteps in the garden, or the whispered rustle of lace against bare skin. The soft sounds of Versailles night hum around you now, crickets, distant laughter, a fountain murmuring secrets to itself. You and your companion rise from the bench slowly, as though the wood itself might protest the end of such a pleasant wait. The path ahead curves away from the canal, bordered by low lavender hedges and the flicker of more lanterns that sway gently, like they're trying to keep time with your footsteps. You wander through what was once called the Whisper Walk. Here, hedges rise a little taller, not so high as to trap you, but enough to cradle you in leafy privacy. Versailles may have been designed for spectacle, but it held its most delicious moments in its quiet corners. The kind of corners that let you walk side by side and pretend no one else exists. Do you know about the ribbon ritual? Your companion asks, tilting their head as though considering whether to actually explain it. You blink. Sounds like something involving either embroidery or witchcraft. Neither, oddly, they say. It was a courtship game played by a certain group of ladies-in-waiting. Each would wear a set of silk ribbons in her hair, each color signifying a different mood or intent. Red for passion, blue for reflection, gold for mischief, lavender for longing. And if someone knew the code, they could respond. With a ribbon of their own, slipped into the lady's glove or hidden in her fan. You imagine the slow unraveling of meaning, how one might comb through a wig for clues or spend an entire evening debating whether a braid placement was a confession or just humidity. Historians still argue whether this was ever actually widespread, your companion adds. But there's at least one scandalous diary entry describing a man who mistook lavender for longing, only to discover it meant please stop talking about horses. You laugh again, and the scent of lavender underfoot seems to puff in pleased agreement. There's something gently intoxicating about these rituals, not just the flirtation, but the effort. The dedication to symbolism, to subtlety. To the dance before the dance. The path opens now onto a small courtyard framed with trellises of climbing roses. The blooms are soft from the night dew, petals curling like secrets not yet told. In the center, a circular marble table rests beneath an iron gazebo where once, it's said, private salons of select courtiers met for midnight discussions. Of poetry. Of philosophy. And occasionally, of which noble was seen disappearing into which linen closet. A servant appears soundlessly and places a silver tray on the table. 2 crystal glasses of a pale golden cordial, faintly bubbling. I didn't order this, you murmur. Neither did I, your companion replies. That's why it's perfect. The glasses are cool in your hands, the cordial tasting faintly of pear and something floral you can't quite place. You sip slowly, aware that this might have been served centuries ago in exactly the same place, beneath the same moon, to 2 people trying equally hard not to say too much all at once. I read once, your companion begins, that the length of a corset ribbon could signal a woman's desire to be undressed slowly or quickly. You choke a little on your drink. Pardon? Well, it's not confirmed. But apparently in some salons, there was this whispered idea, an informal understanding. If a lady's corset laced with a double loop, she expected patience. If the ribbon was left longer, trailing down the back, it was considered a playful challenge. And men knew this? They claimed not to, your companion says, eyes twinkling. But somehow, they always noticed. You shake your head in amusement. Corset flirtation. That's a new one. And yet completely in line with Versailles logic, they say. Where everything visible is a message, and everything hidden is an invitation. You rise from the table, leaving the half-finished cordial to sparkle in the moonlight, and walk toward a small arched doorway at the back of the courtyard. It leads to a staircase spiraling gently downward, flanked by sconces that flicker to life as you descend, as if welcoming you into the undercurrent of the palace. Down here, the air is cooler, stone walls holding on to centuries of secrets, like a wine cellar clutching onto summer. These were once the servants' tunnels, or so the tour books say. But those who truly knew Versailles will tell you, this is where the real intrigue happened. Notes passed. Rendezvous arranged. Corset ribbons measured and misunderstood. Your footsteps echo just faintly, softened by ancient rugs so worn their original colors exist now only in memory. There's a chamber ahead, round domed, with a fountain trickling gently in its center. Candlelight reflects off the water's ripples and paints the walls in golden waves. Your companion stops. This was the moon room. You raise your brows. That sounds scandalous. It was, they grin. But only if you wanted it to be. The moon room was named not for what happened under the moonlight, but because it was always lit like one, soft, silver, barely there. It was where dances paused, where masks were removed, where ribbon messages were sometimes answered not with more thread, but with touch. You sit together on the cool stone bench ringing the room. No music plays, and yet the quiet hum of water, the flicker of candlelight, it all feels like prelude. Did you know, your companion says after a while, that lovers used to use the scent of violet to mark places where they'd met? You glance around. So, this whole room could have reeked of flowers? Not reeked, they say, mock scandalized. Perfumed. And only faintly. Violet, you see, fades fast on the air. It lingers just long enough to remind you something happened, but not long enough to prove it did. Historians, as always, debate the accuracy of this claim. Some say it was invented later by novelists. Others argue there's truth in it. Small violet sachets found pressed into floorboards, or crushed petals mixed into candle wax poured just for these rooms. You lean back, letting your head rest against the cold curve of the wall. So Versailles flirted through flowers, fans, ribbons, gloves, and glances. Your companion finishes. Never underestimate a well-timed glance. Outside, somewhere above, you hear the faint sound of music drifting through the floors. A minuet, maybe? Or something meant to imitate one. You wonder how many guests are dancing in gold-trimmed shoes, utterly unaware of the quieter performance happening in the moon room far below. You close your eyes for just a second, and the world tilts, just slightly. Not in a dizzy way. In the way a kiss feels before it happens, or the way silk slides from skin when no one's rushing. It's the pause again. The permission to feel every detail and say nothing. And in the flicker of that moment, Versailles breathes with you. The air in the moon room grows warmer, though the fountain still sings its silver lullaby. Your eyes drift lazily toward your companion, who has stretched out their legs and tilted their head back as though basking in candlelight. The glow dances along their collar, their cheekbone, the slight arch of a smirk. Shall we walk again? They ask, though either of you has moved. Eventually you rise. The corridor beyond curves upward again, another quiet spiral, this time into the gallery known as the Hall of Soft Scandals. It's not on the official Versailles map, but enough whispers point here. The hallway is narrow, paneled with wood carved into little cherubs so innocent they might combust if anyone actually told them what went on behind these doors. You trail your fingers along the grooves as you pass, your skin picking up faint warmth from candle sconces shaped like rosebuds. A rose is never just a rose at Versailles. You pause at one of the doors. Your companion catches your glance and chuckles. That, they say, is the powdering parlor. You raise your eyebrows. Wasn't that where wigs were? Technically, yes, they reply. But unofficially, it was where courtiers stepped away from a crowded ballroom to powder more than just their wigs. Lips, cheeks, nerves. Sometimes affections. The room is empty now, save for the faint scent of iris root and white musk clinging to the air like a lover reluctant to leave. A long vanity runs along one wall, with dozens of tiny drawers. You slide one open to find a cluster of velvet puffs and a near-empty vial labeled Poudre de Courage. Courage powder? You ask? Meant to be dabbed on the pulse points before making a move, they say. Supposedly imbued with crushed amber and rose petals. Historians still argue whether this was merely perfume marketing or a true superstition. Some even say certain powders were mixed with hints of myrrh or cardamom, thought to embolden the heart or relax the tongue. Either way, it smells faintly of secrets. Your companion watches you pick up the puff and gingerly dab it near your neck. Testing your courage? You grin. Just rehearsing. The corridor leads you further on, to a staircase so narrow you have to walk single file. Your companion goes first this time, their fingers trailing along the wall as though reading some forgotten text carved into stone. The passage opens into another chamber, larger, round, and softly illuminated with what seems like moonlight but must be mirrors. This is the mirror salon. Not the grand gallery you've seen on postcards, but its quieter cousin. Here, the mirrors are cloudy with age, a little warped, enough that your reflection bends delicately, as though it too is curious. The floor is laid with black and white tiles, but not in the sharp contrast of a chessboard. These are worn smooth, faded like sleep. Music plays here, not live, but from a hidden chamber. A lute, perhaps. Or someone with a harp and a fondness for minor keys. Your companion glides across the floor and offers a hand. We haven't danced yet. I don't know the steps, you reply. They smile. Neither did half the court. But they danced anyway. So you place your hand in theirs. Lightly. Just enough to suggest you might vanish if they hold too tight. The two of you move together slowly, bodies swaying in time with the not-quite music. There's no need to talk now. Every step is a sentence. Every pause a question. And in the warped mirror nearby, you catch a glimpse of yourselves, not perfectly rendered, but softened. Cloaked in candlelight and barely their smiles. It feels like looking into someone else's memory, or a story you only half remember. They guide you through the room, your footfalls hushed as satin. There's a rhythm forming, step, turn, lean, laugh. The kind of rhythm that doesn't require direction, only attention. You're not entirely sure whether your heart has changed tempo or if it's always beat like this in rooms like these. I once read, your companion says mid-turn, that when a noblewoman wore a black lace cuff, it meant she was mourning, but also potentially available for consolation. You blink. That seems strategically ambiguous. Which was the point, they reply. Versailles was full of socially acceptable ambiguity. Mourning attire that doubled as flirting armor. Historians must love that. They do. And argue about it constantly. One theory claims the black cuff was merely an expression of private grief, an understated rebellion against the public peacocking of official mourning dress. Another theory suggests it was a subtle invitation to those in the know. I am grieving, yes. But I'm not entirely closed to comfort. You twirl under their arm, and as you come back around, your fingers brush the edge of their sleeve. A shiver dances up your arm, not from cold but from sensation. The fabric is rich, but the skin beneath it is warmer still. The music fades as you reach the far end of the salon. The candles dip lower, their flames shrinking into whispers. Outside the window, the clouds have parted just enough to let the real moon peek in, round and observant, like a chaperone who's given up trying to keep things proper. You both exit quietly, returning to the corridor. The hour has deepened. Somewhere, someone laughs behind a door. Somewhere else, a snore tumbles through velvet. Your path leads now into a library, not the large one, but a private collection hidden behind a tapestry of Artemis hunting with nymphs who seem far more interested in gossip than deer. The shelves are low, the books worn. Some spines are velvet, others painted wood. One particularly plump volume is titled Les Petits Jeux de l'amour et du hasard. You glance at it. Games of love and chance? Popular reading, your companion says dryly. You flip through. No chapters. Just pages of prompts, questions, dares, each written in handwriting that seems suspiciously flirtatious for a formal text. Things like, if you could steal only one item from your lover's chamber, what would it be and why? Describe your perfect midnight escape. Do you prefer to whisper confessions or write them in invisible ink? You shut the book gently, placing it back. The air in the room is scented with paper and possibility. Dusty roses and hidden meanings. Do you suppose they actually use these prompts? You ask. Only the best kind of people, your companion says. A long silence passes. A good one. The kind that doesn't feel like waiting. Come, they say. Let's find one last room before the night ends. You don't ask which. It doesn't matter. Every room in Versailles has been touched by flirtation, warmed by candlelight, haunted by laughter and longing. Wherever you go, you'll bring some of that with you. You follow them down another hallway, one that curves a little tighter and smells faintly of beeswax and bergamot. The kind of scent that lingers in fine gloves and private stationery. The walls are painted a delicate shade of dusty rose, the floor muffled by carpets so plush they silence your steps entirely, conspiring with you, perhaps, to keep this part of the palace just between the two of you. This is the alcove gallery, your companion murmurs. You nod, though you've never heard of it. It's easy to miss on any map, they explain. It was designed for secrecy. 22 private chambers, each with a different purpose, tucked discreetly behind ornate folding panels that resemble decorative murals. From the outside, it's all art and gilding. From the inside, it's a choose-your-own-adventure of Versailles flirtation. Each alcove has its own theme: writing, music, scent, touch, games, wine, poetry, and more. And no one really used them for their labeled purpose, of course. People were supposed to compose odes in the poetry niche, your companion notes. But mostly they whispered stanzas they didn't write and hoped no one asked for a second verse. You trail your fingers along the painted panels until one gives slightly under your hand and swings open with a soft creak. Inside, soft cushions spill across a low settee. The walls are lined with silk panels embroidered with what appear to be constellations. But on closer inspection, they're not stars at all. They're fruits? Fruit constellations, your companion confirms. Very avant-garde. Someone had a thing for pears. There's a bowl of them on the little table, perfectly ripe despite being centuries old. Or maybe just replaced obsessively, like a strange shrine to abundance. You sit down, letting your body sink into the softness, and pluck a pear from the bowl. It's perfectly warm, as if someone knew you'd be arriving. You bite in and the juice drips lazily along your thumb. Sweet, slow, floral. Your companion watches, amused. Pear was a known aphrodisiac, you know. Of course it was. They pluck one too, but don't eat it. Just turn it slowly in their hand, as if reading it like a poem. There was a rumor, they say, that some lovers in Versailles would slice fruit and arrange it to spell secret messages. You tilt your head. Like edible semaphore? Exactly. Pineapple slices for passion, peach halves for pleasure, fig wedges for... Okay, I get it. They smirk. Some say the kitchen staff caught on and played matchmaker just by how they plated the platters. Historians still argue whether that's remotely plausible, you offer helpfully. Of course they do, they reply, biting into their pear. The two of you sit in companionable quiet, licking juice from your fingers while candlelight flickers over the fruit stars. You feel drowsy and alert at the same time, a sensation not unlike how the night air feels after a particularly good kiss. Calm, charged, and humming just under the skin. Eventually, your companion rises and reaches for your hand. Come. I want to show you the listening room. You arch a brow but follow. The next alcove is dimmer, lit by only 2 candles and what seems to be the light of a small fireplace. The walls here are velvet navy blue, quilted with golden buttons in the shape of tiny ears. That's disturbing, you whisper. A little. But effective. There are 2 chairs angled toward each other, close enough that your knees nearly touch when you sit. Between you, a small silver dish holds a pile of folded slips of parchment. One reads, "Confess a desire so small it's almost silly." You both glance at each other. Your companion draws one and reads, "Describe what you wish someone would say to you, just before dawn." They pause, then meet your eyes. Do you want to answer that one? You consider. I think I'd want them to say, "Let's stay here. Just a little longer." A pause. Then a smile. You each draw another. What sound makes you feel safe? The rustle of skirts, your companion says. Or maybe the soft clink of a spoon in a porcelain cup. Domestic noises. Unimportant ones. You reply with, "Rain on wood." Or someone breathing, just slow and steady, beside me. The slips pile gently between you like the hush of old conversation. The kind that didn't need to be recorded because it was never really meant to end, just to meander like this. Your eyes start to feel heavy. Not from boredom, far from it. But from that particular pleasure of being somewhere you don't have to be interesting. Just present. Fully, quietly, unhurriedly there. This was always the point of Versailles, your companion murmurs, as if reading your mind. Not the pomp. Not even the seduction. The art of lingering. Of savoring. Of turning flirtation into furniture. You both laugh softly, letting the moment wrap around you like a shawl. Eventually, you leave the listening room and return to the gallery. The hallway feels quieter now, as though the walls themselves have grown sleepy. You pass alcoves labeled perfume confessionals, glove exchange, and letters left unsent. You stop briefly outside a door labeled the corset room, but decide together that some mysteries should stay a bit mysterious. You reach the end of the hallway and push open a final set of double doors. Beyond is a long room with a curved ceiling, painted like dusk. The floor is covered in thick cushions, rugs, and more fruit than anyone could eat. This was the rest chamber, though it had nothing to do with sleep. Here, lovers once lounged between dances, undoing buttons and metaphors. Some read poetry aloud. Some napped together without ever touching. Some just lay there, side by side, letting the silence fill every gap their words could not. You stretch out now, the silk beneath you cooling your skin. Your companion lies beside you, just close enough to share breath, not close enough to disturb it. You whisper, "What happens when we reach the end of the night?" They close their eyes and murmur, "We begin again, of course." You think of all the little signs left behind tonight, the pear juice, the ribbon, the slip notes. And you realize that Versailles never really slept. It just changed costumes. Sometimes day, sometimes night. Sometimes a mask, sometimes a murmur. And right now you are the murmur. You lie there for a while longer, on the silk-draped floor of the rest chamber, where the air smells faintly of clove and old rosewater. The ceiling above you, painted in shades of velvet dusk, seems to tilt just slightly, like it's watching you and your companion with sleepy approval. One of the candles nearby flickers, but holds steady, as if it, too, is content simply to linger. "I always wondered," you murmur, "what happened to all the things people left behind in these rooms. Love letters, silk gloves, secrets?" Your companion replies, "Probably gathered by the cleaning staff and turned into ghost stories." You laugh, a quiet breath through your nose. The softest kind of music begins again somewhere, harpsichord, faint, just at the edge of hearing. It might be coming from behind the tapestries, or beneath the floorboards, or maybe from the palace itself, remembering its own evenings. Your companion sits up and reaches for a pear, then pauses. "Would you like to see something rarely shown?" That's quite a promise, considering where you already are. You nod. They rise and move toward a small alcove, nearly hidden behind a curtain embroidered with scenes of Apollo chasing Daphne. She's mid-transformation into a tree, but her expression is somewhere between panic and flirtation, like most things at Versailles. Behind it, a slender hallway, lit only by lanterns the color of honey. You walk it together, shoulder brushing shoulder, until you reach a door marked only with a single word, velour. Velvet. Inside, you find the velvet room. Everything, walls, ceiling, floor, is draped in layered velvet in shades of merlot, plum, and oxblood. There's a small couch in the center, surrounded by curtained booths, each one big enough for two, maybe. The entire room hums with the weight of silence, like it's holding its breath. Your companion steps forward. This was where secret confessions were made. You glance at the curtained booths. Romantic? Sometimes, they reply. But not always. Some people confessed fears. Or told truths they couldn't tell elsewhere. Things said here were not to be repeated outside this velvet cocoon. You lift the edge of a curtain and peek into one of the booths. Inside is a velvet bench, a low table with an inkpot, and a single candle already burning. A quill rests beside a parchment bearing only one line in beautiful script. What would you whisper if no one ever knew? You blink. That's unsettling. And inviting, your companion adds. A bit like moonlight through lace. You sit slowly. Take the quill. You don't write anything, not yet. But you imagine the brush of the feather against your fingers. The weight of the ink on the page. What you might say if no one, truly no one, would ever read it but the velvet. Outside the curtain, your companion waits. A moment later, you emerge again, lighter somehow, as if you had confessed something, even if it was only to the shadows. Come, they say, there's one more place before the night turns. You follow, curious now in a deeper way. Not for spectacle, not even for flirtation, but for the quiet intimacy of a world that has let its corset strings loosen just enough to breathe. They lead you through a narrow staircase hidden behind a carved bookcase. It spirals downward, soft footfalls against ancient wood. You count the turns, 4, 5, 6, and then you arrive at a chamber where candlelight is replaced with the warm glow of fire. This, they tell you, is the scent room. It's warmer here. Not hot, but embracing. The walls are lined with shelves holding bottles, bowls, dried petals, bits of bark and citrus peel and resin still sticky to the touch. The smell is thick, amber, narrowly, beeswax, and something else, like a secret you once knew but can't quite place. Each visitor could request a custom scent, your companion explains. Sometimes for seduction. Sometimes for sleep. Occasionally for disguise. You wander the shelves. One small jar reads Midnight Lingerer. Another says torn silk and toasted clove. You raise an eyebrow. That one's oddly specific. They often were. Some had names like Cousin's Smile or Rain on the Balcony. You pick up a vial labeled Lace Unfastened at Dusk. Subtle, you murmur. Surprisingly potent, they reply, gently taking it and uncorking it. The scent that spills out is rich, warm, edged with something gently spicy. You close your eyes. There's the faint sweetness of dried plum, the coolness of violet, and beneath it all, the soft exhale of something utterly human. Skin. Sleep. Sighs. Historians still argue whether the perfumers at Versailles actually believed in the emotional properties of their concoctions, or if it was simply another game. An elaborate seduction of the senses, rather than the body. But then, you think, what's the difference? Your companion dabs a drop of the scent at your wrist. Their fingers linger a second longer than necessary. Now you smell like the end of a good secret, they whisper. You lean in just slightly. And you? I always preferred the less popular one, they say, drawing out a bottle labeled Paper Crush beneath thighs. Bold. I like an underdog. You laugh, and it feels like velvet, low and easy. You sit together by the fire now, the scents warming around you, rising with the heat. Either of you says much? Just that kind of late-night quiet where every word would be too loud, too precise. Instead, there are looks. Glances. Fingers brushing a candle holder. A sigh that might not mean anything but might mean everything. Eventually, the flames dip lower. Your companion stretches, then tilts their head toward a nearby door. Time for the last stop before morning? You nod. You're not even sure what time it is anymore. Versailles doesn't care. It doesn't run on clocks. It runs on moments. Glances. Whispers. Corset laces that take 10 minutes to tie and 10 seconds to undo. You walk toward the final room, your senses hazy and sweet, like the breath of a fig tree after rain. The door ahead is carved with vines, twisted gently around the shape of a keyhole that no longer fits any key. Your companion places a hand on it, waits for a beat, and pushes. It opens. And what waits inside is the kind of space that invites silence. Not from awe, but from permission. A space designed not to dazzle, but to hold. To cradle. To breathe. Your bare feet sink into something plush and forgiving. But you'll explore it properly, in a moment. For now, you let your eyes adjust to the hush. The final room is unlike any space you've seen before, not just in Versailles, but anywhere. It doesn't sparkle, or boast, or insist on its own opulence the way the Hall of Mirrors might. Instead, it hums. Softly. A low, velvet murmur, like the sound of fabric rustling in a lover's hand. You step further in, your bare feet absorbing the warmth of the floor, which feels like thick woven cashmere warmed by fire. The walls are draped entirely in muted gold silk, but not the usual Versailles gold, the kind that glares. No, this is gold with a memory, the kind of gold that once belonged to candlelight and has since mellowed into hush. There are no chairs here. No divans or settees or practical furniture. Instead, piles of cushions in 1,000 different textures, damask, velvet, linen worn soft with age. Some smell faintly of lavender, others of dust, and one unmistakably like cinnamon and longing. This, your companion says, voice low, is the pillow library? You blink. Pillow. Library? They nod solemnly. Each one contains a story. Or a confession. Or both. You laugh softly, then notice they're not joking. They pick up a long, narrow cushion stitched with delicate tulips. This one held a countess's elbow for 2 full seasons. She claimed it gave her dreams that accurately predicted her suitor's intentions. And was she right? Historians still argue whether her pillow dreams were truly prophetic or just wishful embroidery. You sink into a wide, overstuffed cushion embroidered with little crescent moons. As you settle in, you catch the faintest scent of ink and sugar. Your companion joins you, shoulder grazing yours. It's strange, you say. This whole place, it feels like something between a museum and a memory. They smile. That's Versailles. Around the room, other cushions lie askew, as if their previous occupants have only just stepped away for a glass of something chilled. In the far corner, you see a pair of satin slippers tucked together neatly, as though waiting to be reclaimed. No one ever seems to come back for them. Were these rooms used often? You ask, lazily tracing the embroidery on a pillow shaped like a heart, but subtle, more anatomical than decorative. Very, your companion replies. But never scheduled. They weren't part of the official itinerary. People found their way here on instinct. And word of mouth. And scent. And luck. You sigh, stretching until your foot brushes the edge of another pillow. This one squeaks faintly. Someone, long ago, tucked a dried rose inside it. Perhaps a token. Perhaps a dare. Beside you, your companion pulls down a pillow that had been balanced at shoulder height. Its stitching is faintly metallic, forming the shape of a closed eye. From behind it, they produce a folded note. You can still find these, they murmur, unfolding the parchment. Let your secrets sleep where your body cannot. You shiver a little. Too much? No, you whisper. Just the right amount. Outside the room, you can hear nothing. Not even the wind. You're not sure whether the sun has risen or set, or whether time still bothers ticking in this part of the palace. It feels suspended, like the final exhale before sleep fully takes you. You close your eyes and listen to the silence. And then, gently, your companion speaks again. There was once a ritual here, they say. At the edge of the court, when the dancing stopped and the flirting grew. Quieter. Not gone, just softened. Guests would come here, not in pairs, not necessarily. Just together. They would rest. Not talk. Not touch. Just lie in the same space. You hum softly. Like bedtime for grown-ups who didn't want to admit they were tired. Exactly. And the pillows? Some held poems. Some held perfume. Some held nothing at all except the warmth of the last person to use them. You run your fingers along a faded seam. The fabric is loose, tired. Loved. I like this one, you say? Your companion leans in. It liked you first. You stay that way for a long moment. Then they shift, just enough to draw out something hidden behind another cushion. A small book, bound in green silk. No title. They hand it to you wordlessly. Inside, dozens of pages, filled with short verses, most unsigned. Love notes, yes, but not the grand declarations of theater and balcony. These are quiet things. I found your ribbon, and kept it, even though I'm not supposed to. Your voice hums in the sleeves of my coat. Your scent was on the pillow. I stayed one night longer because of it. Each page is more sigh than sentence. You close the book gently and look at your companion. Who wrote these? Anyone. Everyone. No one knows. It's passed down. Left open. Like a guest book for dreams. There's a stillness between you now, but not an awkward one. It's the kind of stillness you share only with someone you don't have to impress. You tuck the book between the cushions again. Let it wait for the next visitor. Somewhere nearby, a small bell chimes. Not loud. Just a soft ding, like the end of a tea service. That's the call, your companion says. For what? For the transition. Day is stretching. You glance at the ceiling. It hasn't changed, not obviously. But there's a softness in the silk now, as though the light behind it has grown more golden than amber. You rise slowly, stretching again. You feel like your bones are a little warmer now, as if they'd been sunning themselves without you noticing. Your companion stands too, and adjusts one of the cushions behind you, as if to leave it just so. As you both step toward the curtain, you pause. Wait, you say. They turn. You reach into the heart-shaped cushion beside you and press your hand against the fabric. After a second, you find the tiny slit near its seam. Inside, a ribbon. Your ribbon. You tie it around your wrist without comment. Your companion only smiles. Then you slip out of the pillow library and into the hallway again. Only now, it doesn't feel like a hallway. It feels like a memory on its way to becoming a dream. Behind you, the door swings shut with a sigh. And the palace, faithful as always, holds its secrets close. You find yourself retracing steps you don't remember taking, though every corridor feels gentler now, less gilded, more drowsy. The chill of Versailles, that famous chill that lives even in summer, has softened. It clings less to your skin and more to the marble, content, perhaps, to let the warmth linger just a little longer. Your companion walks beside you, not leading, not following, but moving as though choreographed to your breath. There's a comfort in it. Like wearing slippers someone else has already broken in. As you round a corner, the corridor opens onto a space you weren't expecting. Not a grand hall, or a salon, or a music room, but a simple chamber, lit by one tall window with gauze curtains drifting in the breeze. The light slants across the floor like spilled honey, catching the corners of a long, narrow table. You step closer. Laid out in neat, whispering rows are gloves. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. All arranged as if in some sacred order only the palace remembers. The glove gallery, your companion murmurs. Not many were invited in. You blink slowly. Is this some kind of storage? They smile. Oh no. This was display. A courtier's gloves told more stories than their journals ever did. You move to the nearest pair. They're ivory, delicate, with stitching so fine it looks like frost traced across silk. These were worn to the spring equinox ball, your companion says. The wearer arrived without a chaperone, stayed late, and was never seen without a smile for the rest of the season. Seduction gloves? They nod. Or perhaps armor. It depends how you look at it. Historians still argue whether gloves were symbols of flirtation, status, or both, but they agree on one thing: you could tell more by someone's choice of gloves than by the poetry they quoted. The stitching, the scent, even how snugly they fit the wrist, each detail sent a message. You drift down the table. A pair of black leather gloves, lined with fur, the fingers slightly frayed. worn by a gentleman known for his midnight walks and inconvenient duels, your companion offers. You smirk. Let me guess, he lost the duels, but not the girls? Exactly. There are lavender-scented gloves embroidered with miniature constellations, for stargazing parties that turned into something else, and soft suede gloves barely the size of your hand. These were gifted, they explain, and returned 6 months later, inside a bouquet of dried violets. No note. There's something quiet, almost reverent, about this place. You trail your fingers across the edges of the table, careful not to disturb anything. The gloves seem to breathe on their own. You half expect one to twitch gently and reach for you. And then you reach the final pair. Not displayed flat like the others, but held upright on a little velvet form shaped like hands reaching in supplication. Red. Not crimson, not the bold, sharp red of declarations, but deep rosewood, aged wine, the color of blushing at the base of the throat. These, your companion says, their voice dropping almost to a whisper, were worn by someone who never spoke of what happened that night. But every year, on the same evening, she returned and touched just one statue in the garden. Which statue? Whichever one had most recently been repaired. You glance sideways. That's poetic. Or petty, they reply. Possibly both. You linger for a moment longer, fingers hovering just above the red gloves. You feel oddly emotional about them, like they've witnessed something you half remember. Your companion steps back and waits. You finally nod, turning toward the soft, gauze-curtained window. The breeze that spills through smells of early morning dew, and something faintly herbal, like thyme and a secret. The scent follows you as you continue down another corridor, until your footsteps change sound, marble to wood, wood to something else. You've stepped into a circular space with a domed ceiling painted in faded shades of cobalt and cream. It's round, soft, and echoless. You say nothing, and the silence says nothing back. This is the listening room, your companion says. But it was never for music. You blink. Then what was it for? Whispers. Regrets. Things not meant to be written down. You sit slowly on a low-cushioned bench that lines the room. It hugs the walls like a protective ring, lined with narrow alcoves just big enough for two. This room could carry sound in curious ways, they go on. If you whispered in one alcove, you could hear it, clear as day, in another, 2 or 3 spaces away. You imagine it, secret lovers sending coded messages across the room under the guise of decorum. Enemies pretending to nap, ears pricked like cats. Courtiers pretending to be above it all, but straining for a syllable that might mean gossip, scandal, or possibility. You lean back, testing the bench. It feels like a memory. And when you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, not words, but tone, the warm, round hum of someone saying your name softly, not expecting you to answer. Did people really believe it worked? You murmur. Historians still argue whether the acoustics were intentional, or just a happy accident. But either way, it became tradition. You tap the wall beside you. It feels hollow, curved like a shell. I could whisper something now, you muse. Your companion grins. I'd hear it 3 alcoves down. You give it a try. Lean in, press your lips to the curve of the alcove, and whisper something nonsensical. I think the red gloves still smell like cinnamon. Your companion has already moved a few spaces away, lounging as if nothing's happening. Then, without warning, they speak. Out loud. I always thought they smelled like longing. You laugh. There is something deliciously silly about whispering in a palace built for thunderous applause and royal commands. Here you are, exchanging soft nonsense with someone who may or may not be wearing borrowed gloves and a borrowed name. The walls don't judge. The bench cradles your weight. And for a moment, you feel unburdened. You and your companion return to silence, not awkwardly, but like slipping into warm water. The domed ceiling stretches above you like the inside of a bell, and though there is no sound, it feels full. Safe. You exhale. Somewhere, very far away, a door opens, and you think, not yet. Because Versailles has more stories left tonight. You ease yourself from the quiet curves of the listening room, reluctantly standing as though parting from an old friend who always remembers your birthday. The wooden floor beneath your steps creaks softly, a kind of sleepy protest, as though it, too, had dozed off mid-secret. Your companion stretches lazily, adjusts a button that was never undone, and gestures toward a nearby archway trimmed with faded blue velvet. This way leads to the game gallery, they say. Games? You murmur. Is that code for something? They tilt their head. Well, yes. But also no. It's Versailles. Nothing means just one thing. You follow. The hallway twists like a ribbon that's been dropped, and when you arrive, it takes a moment for your eyes to make sense of it. The game gallery isn't brightly lit. It's full of shadows, dappled with flickering candlelight from iron wall sconces shaped like outstretched hands. Tables of every size and description fill the space, chessboards carved from lapis, mahjong tiles that smell faintly of citrus, elaborate backgammon sets with tiny porcelain dice that wink up at you like co-conspirators. There are card tables with fan-folded decks, marbles like crystal gumdrops, and something involving swans that no one seems to know the rules to. But that's not what catches your eye. It's the couple in the corner, motionless, not quite statues. They sit at a card table draped in plum velvet, eyes fixed on one another, cards held delicately, like lovers holding hands in reverse. They'd been here a while, your companion whispers. No one really knows how long. You lean closer. They are so still. Wax figures, perhaps? But their expressions are too alive, mid-thought, mid-yearning, like they were frozen just before deciding to cheat. What were the stakes? You ask? Your companion shrugs. Some say a kiss. Some say the rights to a poem. Some say, well, historians still argue whether it was affection, property, or simply the best seat at supper. You pass more tables, some empty, others mid-play. One features a complicated spiral board where ivory mice are racing toward a hunk of amber cheese. Popular game among the mistresses, your companion says casually. Lots of symbolism. You pick up a tiny mouse and flip it in your palm. Did anyone actually win? Sometimes. But no one liked a winner at court. Winning was a bit gauche. You smirk. So the object was to nearly win. Exactly. The game gallery wasn't for amusement, you realize. It was choreography. Every flick of a fan, every roll of the dice, every carefully feigned misplay was a wordless note in an ongoing flirtation. You reach a table scattered with glossy stones and soft brushes. Courtship charades, your guide offers. Without words, of course. You raise an eyebrow. You had to paint your desires, literally, using blush powder on these stones. And people just guessed? Sometimes. Sometimes it was better if they didn't. You finger a faded brush with bristles still stained rose pink. I would have drawn something scandalous. Your companion grins. Like what? You lean in and whisper, a perfectly folded napkin. They gasp in mock delight. Absolutely indecent. Laughter bounces between you, light and quiet, like silk slippers over stone. There's something unmistakably sensual about this room. But not overt. Not crude. More like leaning too close to someone when you both pretend not to notice. More like losing on purpose because the way they smile at your failure is worth the forfeit. You sit at one of the tables. It's covered in a game you don't recognize. Dozens of carved wooden discs, each etched with a different symbol. Moons. Roses. A single key. A rabbit with its ears twisted like question marks. You pick one up and glance at your companion. Taraki? You guess. Close. A predecessor. Court interpretation discs. Fortune-telling? They shake their head. More like personality sketching. You choose 3, and I tell you the story they make. You smile lazily. Go on, then. You reach out and select your 3, the rose, the locked box, and a slipper turned upside down. Your companion leans back, folding their arms with dramatic flair. Ah, they begin, you're someone who prefers to be chased. The rose means invitation. The box means a hidden motive. And the upside-down slipper? That means you're clumsy with goodbyes. You chuckle. That's uncomfortably accurate. I only report what the discs reveal. Do them lie? Only if asked nicely. You play for a little longer, selecting strange, esoteric symbols and receiving stories in return. A sword wrapped in lace suggests you once fought someone using only compliments. A mirror missing its frame means you've been mistaken for someone's dream, at least once, and let them believe it. The room begins to soften around you. The flickering candlelight swells and dips like gentle waves, and even the frozen couple at the plum table seem a little less tense. You glance again at the spiral mouse game. Do you think we could play? You ask. Only if you're willing to lose in style. You sit side by side at the tiny table and begin moving the ivory mice. It's a silly, sweet little game with almost no logic, but you both pretend it's the most important thing in the world. Your fingers brush over the board. A tail gets caught. You nudge a piece forward with your pinky. Your companion sighs dramatically and declares defeat with the sorrow of a Shakespearean villain. You've won, they whisper. What will you claim? You pause, smile faintly. Permission, you murmur, to keep playing. There's no need to finish the game after that. You've already won, and so have they. You both stand slowly, and as you do, the frozen couple at the plum table shift, only slightly. Just enough to tilt their cards face down and breathe out at last. You leave the game gallery with that same exhale. The kind that comes only after an evening of charming mistakes and half-accidental glances across candlelit tables. Back in the hallway, the air smells of citrus and possibility. And maybe, just maybe, you've left your own gloves somewhere behind. The hallway curls like a ribbon dropped by an impatient duchess, half-hearted, elegant, and probably scented with bergamot. Your shoes make the faintest hush on the worn parquet floor, as though even the planks have decided to tiptoe in this part of the palace. Your companion doesn't speak, at least not yet. They walk ahead now, as if giving you time to digest the games, the almost wins, the murmurs folded into glove seams. You trail behind at a gentle pace, as if being led somewhere slightly forbidden, but not in a dangerous way. In a bedtime way. At last, they push open a double door with no handle. It yields with a whisper and reveals a narrow stair spiraling upward. Attic? You guess. Closed, they say. But with silk drapes and better gossip. You follow them up, one hand grazing the stone wall for balance. It's cool to the touch. You wonder if this was where the maids once snuck up to whisper about princes, or where someone once cried for being assigned to serve dinner instead of dance at it. When you emerge, the light changes. It's pink. Just faintly, but undeniably the rosy hue of drapery catching sunset, or blush dust on parchment. This, they declare softly, is the room of soft disobedience. You blink. That sounds fabricated. Completely, they reply. But also true. The chamber is small, irregularly shaped, like someone cut a slice of cake and forgot to measure. Low ceilings, rounded corners, and windows tucked at odd heights, all shaded in layers of gauze, tulle, and lace. At the center of the room is a daybed, draped in velvet, littered with fans and half-buttoned bodices. The rumor, your companion says, sitting delicately on the edge of the bed, is that this was where young ladies were sent when they became inconvenient. You raise an eyebrow. In what sense? Oh, you know. Sighing too much at the wrong dance partner. Writing names in the condensation on carriage windows. Tripping on purpose to be caught. You smile. So this was the time-out room. With better pillows. You pick up a fan, cream silk, stiff with gold embroidery. It flutters open with a sound like a whispered yes. Fans, of course, were never just for cooling oneself. Court ladies used them the way modern spies use codebooks. A flick to the left could mean follow me. A slow close might signal you're safe. Historians still argue whether the full fan codebook ever existed in one place, or whether every woman simply made up her own and hoped her suitor caught on. You fan yourself lazily and glance at your companion. So, what happens in the room of soft disobedience? They lie back on the bed, hands behind their head. Mostly sighing. Sometimes poetry. A great deal of contraband pastries. You plop beside them. Pastries? Wouldn't you sneak in eclairs if you were being punished for flirtatious ankles? You concede the point with a nod. The room smells faintly of orange blossom, crushed parchment, and something sugary, like icing left too close to candlelight. In one corner, there's a dressing screen painted with faded swans. Someone has draped a petticoat over it like an offering. Beneath the bed, you spot a pair of embroidered slippers with initials you can't quite decipher. You exhale deeply. There's something about this space that makes your shoulders uncoil. You hadn't realized they'd been tight since you entered the palace, but now they melt. Maybe it's the mismatched furniture. Or the cushion that's slightly sunken, like it remembers someone better. Or maybe it's the velvet curtain over the mirror, because in this room, no one's expected to pose. You close your eyes briefly. A breeze sneaks through the tiny window and trails fingers across your neck. Your companion sits up and points to a wooden box in the corner. It's small, plain, and suspiciously innocent looking. What's that? They grin. The suggestion chest. Oh no. Oh yes, they say, standing to fetch it. Court ladies would leave anonymous ideas for one another. Mostly absurd. Sometimes scandalous. Always decorative. You sit up straighter. Read one. They open the lid with great ceremony and fish out a square of folded parchment, sealed with a smudge of lipstick. Unfolding it, they read, "Replace the Countess's perfume with elderflower extract and pretend not to notice." You laugh. That's cruel. Also, historically plausible. Another one. Challenge the Duke of Argonne to a duel over embroidery quality. Insist on fencing with hat pins. You wheeze. They draw a final note. Ask for lemon custard at every meal until someone confesses they've been watching you. You rest your head against the back wall. I feel like these women were either geniuses or deeply bored. Both, they say. Deep boredom breeds excellent chaos. You drift in that sweet, silly warmth for a while, tracing the grooves in the floorboards with your toes. Did anything serious ever happen here? You ask. Your companion tilts their head. Once, a pair of lovers eloped after a shared nap on that very bed. They left behind matching handkerchiefs embroidered with, wait for it, tiny ships sailing away. That's unbearably poetic. Historians still argue whether they were actually in love or just desperate to escape a poorly choreographed quadrille. You lie back and stare at the ceiling. Someone's carved initials into the wood with what looks like a very determined pin. You imagine the girl, perhaps banished for blushing at the wrong marquee, angrily stabbing her name into the beams, lace cuffs trembling with indignation. You wonder what happened to her. You wonder if she, too, sat on this bed and read absurd suggestions from a lipstick-smeared box and wondered whether tomorrow would bring another dance or another exile. Or maybe she just napped. And that was enough. Eventually, you and your companion rise. The daybed sighs in protest, its springs adjusted to secrets. You walk toward the door, but before you go, you tuck something small into the suggestion chest, a torn scrap of fabric with the word "stay" stitched in barely their thread. You say nothing. Neither does your companion. Because in the room of soft disobedience, no one asks questions like "what did you mean by that?" They just close the box, gently, and pretend not to smile. You descend from the room of soft disobedience slowly, as if gravity itself has become reluctant. The stairs seem longer on the way down, or maybe it's just the weight of velvet sighs and lipstick-sealed secrets clinging to your shoulders like a shawl made of almost confessions. Your companion says nothing for a while. It's a comfortable silence, the kind that buzzes faintly with shared mischief and the scent of pastry that you can't quite place. You think it might have been almond. Eventually, the two of you emerge into another stretch of Versailles that feels slightly off. There's a hush here, yes, but a deliberate one. As if someone once declared, this corridor is for secrets, and everyone who passed through afterwards simply agreed. We're almost there, your companion says. Almost where? They don't answer, just turn left into a doorway nearly hidden behind a tapestry that depicts, of all things, a very confused goat staring at a broken sundial. You'd ask, but honestly, you're afraid the answer might involve a duke, 2 scandals, and an early morning drizzle. The room beyond is dim and warm, like a sunbeam got caught inside a jewelry box. The walls are covered in paintings, not portraits, but sensual still lives. Half-peeled oranges. Unlaced corsets draped over chairs. Gloves abandoned beside candle stubs. A pear that's been bitten and then lovingly painted before anyone could finish eating it. What is this? You ask. Welcome, your companion says, to the gallery of lingering. You chuckle. Of course it is. No one was supposed to be in love at Versailles, they explain, but everyone was. Constantly. Dramatically. Briefly. So the gallery was born for the in-between moments. You step further in. The floor is polished to a gentle shine, like it's been wept on politely. Every surface seems to hum with memory. People came here after letters, your companion continues. After stolen glances. After almosts. Sometimes before rendezvous. Sometimes right after. Let me guess, you murmur. Historians still argue whether any of it was real. Always. You approach a painting of a bowl of figs, one of them is split open, seeds glistening like rubies. This one's? Suggestive, you say. It's called Midday Appetite. Painted by someone's third cousin who was definitely exiled afterward. You turn to another, a lace collar crumpled beside a teacup, a spoon laid neatly on top, like a goodbye kiss trying too hard to be casual. They weren't subtle, were they? Not even a little. You find yourself walking slower. Something about the room invites dawdling. Not in the touristy, look at everything way, but the emotional kind, where you linger because some part of you is being pulled gently by the past, and it doesn't want to let go. Your companion takes a seat on a velvet settee that looks like it's upholstered in the color murmur. You join them, both facing a fireplace that flickers without heat. Letters were exchanged here, they say, but not out loud. You tilt your head. How does one exchange a letter not out loud? They left them on the third cushion from the left, your companion replies with a perfectly straight face. If you sat on it, and it crinkled, it meant someone wanted you. You immediately shift your weight to the third cushion. Nothing. Worth a try, you sigh. They grin. There were rules here, they say, suddenly softer. Unwritten ones? Tell me. Fine, they say, pretending to count them on invisible fingers. Rule 1, no touching unless by accident. Rule 2, no questions, only observations. Rule 3, if someone looks at you for longer than 4 seconds, you are legally required to blush. And Rule 4? You ask? Leave before you mean it. The fire flickers. Or maybe your chest does. You spot a small writing desk tucked behind a curtain. A quill rests in a glass of rosewater. Someone's half-finished letter still lies open. Do not come tonight, it begins. They have changed the watchman, and your absence will ache in places I haven't told you exist. You read it aloud. Wow, your companion murmurs. That's peak lingering. Do you think they made it the next night? Historians still argue whether the watchman was bribed or simply fell asleep. You fold the letter again, gently, and return it to its place. There's a mirror in the corner, not to look at yourself, but to remember how someone once looked at you. You stand in front of it anyway, watching your own face soften in the golden candlelight, and for a moment you see yourself as if you were someone's secret. You blink, and the moment passes. You're just you again, in slippers slightly too warm, next to someone with 1,000 stories and a smirk that probably could start a duel if properly applied. You glance around. Were there ever actual affairs begun here? Oh, dozens. Maybe hundreds. But most weren't really affairs. More like gestures. Gestures? Half-written lines of poetry. A hand barely brushing another. A game of what if with no intention of being played out. You sit again, facing the paintings. Your companion leans toward you, voice low. They say the gallery still listens. You raise an eyebrow. Say something to it, they urge. You look around, at the figs, the corset, the ghost of a sigh hovering above the teacup. And you whisper, I almost loved you. The silence that follows is not empty. It's full of echoes. Your companion breathes out. See? It heard you. The two of you sit there for a while longer, not because there's more to say, but because you've stumbled into one of those rare silences that feels like an answer. Eventually, you both rise. You pass the paintings once more, the fig, the spoon, the forgotten glove, and you don't look back. In the hallway, the hush lingers on your skin like perfume. You wonder if it will cling to your pillow later, when you sleep, or if it will slip between your dreams, like a note tucked into a third cushion. The moment you leave the gallery of lingering, something changes in the air. It's not dramatic, like a fan snapping shut or a corset ribbon tugged too tightly. It's subtler than that. Like a sigh slipping under a doorframe, or the sound of silk brushing against brocade. The palace has shifted, and you're moving into its quieter pulse now, past the places where longing lingered and into the spaces where it was practiced. Your companion leads you down another hall, this one narrower and warmly lit. The sconces flicker just enough to give the walls that buttery candle glow that makes everything, including your own shadow, feel like it's been part of this story all along. At the end of the hallway, you reach a modest door, nearly hidden by a tall arrangement of dried lavender and curling scrollwork. Your companion raps 3 times, not loudly, not secretively. Just with the assurance of someone who knows a door will open if it's meant to. It does. Inside is what can only be described as Versailles' worst-kept secret, the parlor of playful improprieties. You can tell immediately it's a favorite room. Not because of anything flashy, quite the opposite, really. The space is modest by palace standards. Low velvet stools. A round table with 3 unlit candlesticks. A decanter of something honey-colored on a tray that's definitely been used this week. And the unmistakable air of laughter that's been folded into the upholstery. This is where people learn how to misbehave, your companion says. Learned? You echo, raising an eyebrow. Well, they correct with a smirk, practiced, mostly. There are games strewn about, dice made of ivory, a stack of cards with gilt edges, a fan spread across the floor like someone dropped it mid-flirt and forgot to retrieve it. A domino set glimmers from beneath the edge of the settee like a secret dare. Who came here? You ask, perching on a chair that gives slightly under your weight, as though sighing with recognition. Everyone. Eventually. Ladies-in-waiting, bored ambassadors, composers with scandalous fingers. Even a king or two, depending on the year and the wine supply. You survey the room, imagining it filled with quick eyes, sly hands, and laughter muffled behind painted fans. Was this risque? You ask. Oh, very. But in a way that was all suggestion and absolutely no commitment. They pour you a glass from the honey-colored decanter and hand it over. What is it? You ask. Almond cordial. Or possibly very old wine. Historians still argue whether this was medicinal or recreational. You take a sip. It tastes like mischief. Your companion sits across from you and deals a hand of cards you've never seen before, each one painted with scenes that fall somewhere between mythology and gossip. A nymph fleeing a goat in a powdered wig, a lute player with far too many lovers, a pair of shoes peeking out from beneath the wrong curtain. The game is simple, they say, fanning out their cards. Find the one who's lying. You smile. That's every game here, isn't it? Exactly. The two of you play in companionable quiet, broken occasionally by eye-roll-worthy card descriptions. Is that one supposed to be Mars? No, it's the Comte de Florel. He just thinks he's Mars. Mid-hand, your companion leans forward, eyes alight with memory. There's a story, they begin, about the Duchess de Vigna and the tale of a comet. You nod encouragingly. She hosted a game night the evening Halley's comet passed over Paris. Wore a dress with a silver ribbon that trailed behind her like a meteor. At exactly midnight she blew out all the candles, kissed the ambassador of Spain, and declared herself unfit for monogamy. You blink. And then what? She won the game, of course. You laugh. Naturally. You can feel yourself settling into the rhythm of this room, one heartbeat slower than the last. The game drifts to an end without a clear winner, and neither of you cares. Instead, your companion stands and crosses to a cabinet tucked into the wall. It opens with a soft click to reveal dozens, perhaps hundreds, of tiny boxes, each labeled in elegant, fading script. They run a finger across the rows and finally pull one free. Inside, a silk ribbon, a miniature spoon, and a folded scrap of muslin. Tokens, they explain. From forfeits. Forfeits? Losers in the parlor left behind something small. Not always valuable, but personal. Something to remember them by, or forget them with, depending. You lift the spoon. It's delicately tarnished. This belonged to someone? A harpist. Lost a game of truth dice and had to confess which courtier she dreamed about for 3 weeks straight. She refused, so the spoon stayed. You tuck it back into its box, somehow reverent. Next to the cabinet is a collection of fans, each labeled with a name and a date. You pick up one, navy silk, trimmed with lace, and unfold it slowly. Written on the inside, in the neatest ink, are the words, "I never intended to stay." You close the fan. So much of Versailles, you murmur, is made of almosts. Your companion nods. Almost told. Almost touched. Almost stayed. You set the fan down and look around once more. What's the rule of the parlor? You ask. Every room seems to have one. They consider this. 2, actually, they say. Rule 1, flirt as if your life depends on it. Rule 2, leave nothing behind, you'll miss too much. You glance again at the cabinet of tokens. The fans. The cordial glass in your hand, still warm from your touch. Seems like everyone failed at Rule 2. Of course they did, your companion replies. That's what made it fun. You chuckle and stand, stretching slightly. You feel looser here. Less laced up. More like yourself, but in a mirror, slightly better lit. The room hums behind you as you exit. It's not sad to leave, just softly unwilling. The door closes, but it doesn't quite click shut. Just in case you need to come back. You walk now through a hallway that seems stitched from candlelight. The shadows on the walls sway gently, not from drafts. Versailles scoffs at such vulgar inconveniences, but from the movement of time itself. You feel it brushing past you like a curious cat, trailing its whiskers along the edge of your memory. Your companion leads you without speaking for a moment, just letting the hush settle. When they finally do speak, their voice is soft, like sugar dust on warm fruit. There's a room, they say, that only the best liars ever find. Liars? You ask, intrigued. And storytellers? Which, if we're being honest, is just a fancier kind of liar with a better wardrobe. You're led through a velvet drape, then past a tall mirror that seems to smirk at your reflection. Finally, you step into a space that feels like the inside of a memory, half-lit, richly scented, and padded in every direction. It's called the Chamber of Confessions, but not in any religious sense. No one here is interested in sins. Only secrets. Especially the whispered, silk-trimmed kind that never made it into anyone's journal but left faint traces on the pillowcase. The walls are painted a warm, dusky gold, the exact hue of candlelight right before it flickers out. Plush cushions in every shade of longing are scattered around, and low tables bear bowls of sugared violets, tiny marzipan fruits, and quills. Yes, quills, because in this room, people wrote their truths down. Invisible ink, your companion says, pointing to a jar labeled Essence of Betrayal with alarming nonchalance. Only readable when warmed over a certain kind of candle. They tried lemons once. Big mistake. You sink into a cushion so inviting you forget what bones are. So who came here? You ask, already guessing the answer. Those who couldn't say it out loud, but couldn't keep it inside either. You look around for signs, anything written, etched, remembered. But the room, clever thing that it is, has preserved its anonymity with the fierce loyalty of a devoted valet. Your companion hands you a slip of parchment. It's blank. For you, they say. You blink. To confess something? No, they whisper. To imagine something so vividly it almost becomes true. You stare at the paper for a long moment. Then, slowly, you take the quill and dip it in ink that smells faintly of cinnamon and regret. You write just one line. I remember a hand that never touched mine. You place it face down on a silver tray already dotted with other folded fictions. or truths, or both. Historians still argue whether any of these notes were ever read, or if the act of writing them was the point all along. Your companion smiles at you like they've done this before. Do you want to see the best one? They ask, rising from their cushion. You nod. They lead you to a cabinet carved with vines and tiny sleeping foxes. Inside is a stack of letters, old, worn, tied with blue ribbon. Your companion carefully selects one, unfolds it, and hands it over. The paper is thin, soft from many readings. It reads, "You smelled like oranges once, and I pretended I didn't notice. I still pretend. But I bought oranges yesterday, and now my hands won't stop remembering you." You exhale slowly, the kind of breath that ends in silence rather than sound. You return the letter. Who wrote it? No one knows. Maybe everyone. You wander the room again, tracing your fingers over the embroidered cushions, the delicate gold leaf on the candle holders, the worn corner of the confession desk where countless elbows once leaned. In the far corner, a harp sits, gently untuned, politely out of practice. You pluck a string. It hums, faintly scandalized to be touched after all this time. Your companion joins you. They say a harpist once played a melody here so tender that a diplomat cried into his lace cuffs. Did they fall in love? They fell in almost. A beat of silence. You rest your hand on the harp's frame. Why does it feel, you murmur, like everything in this palace is whispering almost? Because it is, they say. Versailles was built on symmetry and control, but the people who lived here were human. Messy, yearning, extravagant. So they turned almost into an art form. You turn toward your companion. What would your confession be? They pause. Then answer, not with a line, but a question. Do you ever wonder, they ask, what might have happened if someone hadn't looked away? You don't respond. The question lands softly, and that's enough. The air in the chamber of confessions is warmer now. Maybe it's the invisible ink, or the invisible emotions. Either way, something lingers. You gather yourself, though the cushions protest. Before you leave, your companion taps the side of a golden urn. Place your hand here, they say. It seals the confession. You do. The urn gives off the faintest warmth, like the cheek of someone who's just told you the truth. And with that, you step out. Back into the corridor, which seems a touch less expectant than before. As if it, too, has heard what it needed. You glance over your shoulder once. The curtain sways gently closed. And the secrets rest. At least for now. Your steps are quieter now. Perhaps it's the thick carpet beneath your shoes or the gentle hush that's fallen over your limbs like a silk robe. But more likely it's the hour. The palace has begun to breathe differently, softer and slower, as if it knows that everything thrilling must eventually melt into a sigh. Your companion walks ahead with a languid ease. You've stopped asking where you're going, partly because it doesn't matter, and partly because every room in Versailles seems to promise some new detail of desire hidden behind its brocade walls. You reach a staircase that spirals downward. Not the grand, gilded kind that echoes with courtly announcements, but a side stair, discreet, carpeted, and clearly meant for those who didn't want to be seen descending. You follow it, step by step, into a hallway lit by sconces shaped like crescent moons. At the end, a pair of heavy velvet curtains. Beyond them, something entirely different. It's not a salon or a boudoir. Not a games room or a secret garden terrace. It's a dressing room. But not just any dressing room. The midnight room, your companion murmurs, parting the curtains. The space is warm, like someone recently bathed in it. Mirrors, too many to count, line the walls. They reflect not only your image but each other, until the effect is like standing in the middle of an endless ball of candlelight. Your face bounces back at you 1,000 ways, some a bit kinder than others. In the center, a chaise longue draped in linens the color of old moonlight, and next to it, a dressing table cluttered with beautiful nonsense, silver brushes, pearl-handled scissors, a bowl of rose petals that look recently wept upon. On a nearby chair hangs a corset. It's half-laced. You approach it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for relics or love letters. Someone was interrupted, you say. Or someone was waiting, your companion replies. The midnight room, you learn, wasn't for putting on the corset. It was for taking it off. Slowly. Ritually. Affectionately, if possible. They called it the unlacing, your guide explains, wandering to a glass cabinet filled with ribbon fragments and antique combs. A moment shared only between the wearer and someone they trusted. Or someone they wanted to trust. Or someone whose hands they simply couldn't bear to say no to. You stare at the corset again. Pale blue, with stitching so fine it looks like it could hold secrets between the seams. And it happened here? You ask, stepping toward the chaise. Always after midnight. Always with candlelight. Always with silence. Or music so soft it might have been imagined. They pick up a ribbon from the cabinet. It's frayed at the end, as if someone once pulled it too hard in a moment of urgency, then thought better of it. Was it romantic? You ask, almost afraid of the answer. Sometimes, they say. But not always. Sometimes it was simply intimate. You let that word sink in. Not charged with modern implications. Just gently, profoundly present. Historians still argue whether the unlacing was a formal ritual or an informal excuse for companionship in a world too obsessed with pretense. Some say it was a custom among lovers. Others insist it was a practical solution for ladies who had no maids they trusted near their thoughts. But everyone agrees, it happened in rooms like this. You sit carefully on the chaise, running your hand over the fabric. It's plush, but worn in places. Evidence, perhaps, of restless backs and the soft indent of knees. Your companion kneels beside the corset chair, running their fingers over the boning as if reading a language lost to time. They whisper, that the loosened laces were a promise, one made quietly, without need for words. A promise to listen. A promise to linger. You feel something in your chest twist gently, like a ribbon being unknotted. Slowly. Deliberately. The mirrors, still watching, seem less judgmental now. As if they, too, have witnessed more vulnerability than vanity in this room. On the wall beside you hangs a curious object, a framed diagram of corset patterns. But tucked behind the glass, you notice, is something else. A note. Written in fine, faded script, it reads, "You loosened the laces and asked me nothing. That's how I knew." You don't ask what it means. You already know. Nearby, an hourglass filled with lavender-colored sand has nearly run its course. The grains drop without sound, but the message is clear. This is not a room for beginnings. It's for endings, the gentle kind. You and your companion don't speak for a while. Instead, you both explore silently. You lift a silver hairbrush, still holding one auburn strand. You examine the velvet slippers lined up beneath the dressing table, each a different size, suggesting the room was shared by many but claimed by none. At last, your companion gestures toward a nearby alcove. A harp sits there, not for performance but for ambience. You pluck a single note. It hums low and warm. You know, your companion says, some people left the unlacing room lighter, as if a part of them had been gently lifted away. And others? Others left remembering the pressure of hands that had lingered just a little longer than needed. You rise from the chaise. The corset stays untouched. Not because it frightens you, but because it deserves to wait for someone who needs it. You follow your companion out of the room. As the curtains draw closed behind you, you swear you hear the faint sound of ribbon being drawn through embroidered loops. Not hurried. Not hesitant. Just sure. And somewhere in the distance, a clock chimes softly. Midnight has passed. The laces are loose. And the night is beginning to undress itself. You're not sure how long it's been since you first entered Versailles, but time has taken on a soft, elastic quality. Like a ribbon left untied, trailing gently behind you as you move deeper into the palace's twilight maze. The hush has grown cozier, the candlelight warmer, as if the walls themselves are leaning in to listen. Your companion doesn't speak at first. They merely open a carved wooden door with a brass handle shaped like a rose stem, and gesture for you to enter. Inside, the room is strange. It's round for one, perfectly so, Lined with mirrors on every surface, it offers a disorienting and oddly romantic illusion, an endless carousel of flickering candlelight and velvet shadows. There are fans everywhere, laid carefully on tables, hung delicately on ribbon hooks, stacked in little lacquered boxes with notes written in old script, not to be opened on rainy days, used once, never returned, too dangerous for small talk. You step farther in. This, your companion says quietly, is the fan room. You blink. I thought fans were for fanning, you say, immediately aware of how silly it sounds in a place where mirrors gossip and corsets deliver coded messages. They were, they say with a smile. But at Versailles, a fan was never just a fan. It was a whole language. You pick one up, delicate lacework edged in silver, the scent of old jasmine still clinging to its folds. It feels oddly alive in your hand. One snap of the wrist could mean follow me. A slow flutter? Unflattered but married. And if you dropped it, your guide lifts an eyebrow. Well, let's just say someone would follow. Every movement meant something. They continue, gesturing to a painted fan with tiny cherubs tumbling across its surface. Historians still argue whether these gestures were officially codified, or if the court simply played along to make flirting more delicious. You try mimicking a few, a quick flick, a long sweep, a slow half-close like a sigh. Your companion chuckles. Careful. That last one was practically an invitation to scandal. The mirrors around you seemed to shimmer in agreement. It turns out there were rules. Fans were not to be opened indoors unless in use. Never held open when in mourning. Never borrowed. And under no circumstance should one ever snap shut a fan during a formal dinner. That was the equivalent of slapping someone with a glove. You're joking, you say? Would I joke about fans? Your companion says, mock offended. You're handed a small parchment, folded into a square. It's a kind of cheat sheet. It lists meanings like a romantic Morse code. Fan held over right cheek, yes. Fan held over left cheek, no. Drawing across the forehead, you have changed. Letting it rest on the lips, I dream of you. You pause over that last one. There's something haunting about it. Sweet, but so subtle it could vanish in an exhale. You fan yourself idly, just to feel the breeze. The air smells of lavender and ink. They use fans to pass messages. Your companion continues, reaching for a painted one that opens to reveal a hidden compartment. A sprig of rosemary. A ring. A folded note in code. You lean in. Did anyone ever get caught? Oh, frequently, they say. But the magic of Versailles was that being caught wasn't always a punishment. You raise an eyebrow. Sometimes, they continue, it was a beginning. There's a small chaise at the side of the room, barely big enough for two but clearly intended for exactly that number. A fan rests on each cushion, one red, one white. The symbolism is unspoken but deeply felt. Courtship was a dance, your companion says, and fans were the music. You pause before a gilded display case, where the most exquisite fans are showcased like delicate fossils. Feathers, ivory, painted silk. One has tiny rubies embedded along its edge. They say, your guide says, voice softer now, that fan belonged to a duchess who fell in love with someone whose name she never learned. She dropped it on purpose in the corridor outside the chapel. The person picked it up, held it to their chest, and walked away without ever looking back. Did she see them again? No one knows. But she never used another fan. You stand very still, suddenly aware of how many hands have held these fans. How many secrets they've known. How many glances they've deflected, or invited. It feels oddly intimate, surrounded by the ghosts of gestures. You turn to your companion. What if someone didn't know the language? You ask. What if they used a fan wrong? They smile. Then someone nearby would teach them. With patience. Or flirtation. Or both. You try again, this time lifting the fan to your lips and pausing. Your guide exhales slowly, as if you've answered a question they hadn't asked aloud. For a long moment, the mirrors multiply the moment back at you, with the fan, your guide, watching gently, the two of you, suspended in a room where meaning passes between silences. Finally you close the fan, slowly. There's something elegant in the gesture. Something complete. Your guide nods toward the doorway. It's time, they say. For what? To remember that real courtship, they say, was never about declarations. It was about decoding. You pass the final display, a cracked fan with a note pinned beside it. It reads simply, I said everything I couldn't say. You step back into the hallway, still holding the fan you borrowed. You hand it to your companion, who tucks it gently into the folds of their sleeve. It's yours now, they say. Not the fan, the gesture. The corridor is darker than before. But you feel lighter. Like someone has said something meaningful to you in a language you've just begun to understand. The corridor outside the fan room is narrower than you remember, as if Versailles is gently pressing in to coax you closer to its center. Candlelight glows low and steady now, less like a welcome and more like a whisper. You and your companion walk in silence, though it's the kind of silence that hums with things left sweetly unspoken. At last, you reach another door. This one is unmarked. Plain, by Versailles standards, which still means it's framed in delicate gold leaf and inset with carved flowers, but no fanfare, no guards, no crest. Your companion opens it without ceremony. Inside is what can only be called a salon. But not for dancing. And not for music. This one is for listening. You step inside, and it's like walking into velvet. Not just the texture of the furniture, though the divans, cushions, and curtains are indeed velvet, in dusky rose and twilight gray, but the atmosphere itself is velvet. Muted. Plush. Private. It smells like orange blossom and faint wood smoke. The kind of room where laughter never echoes and secrets don't need to be whispered. The listening room, your companion says quietly. You nod, as if you've always known. There's a soft rustle behind a screen, followed by the gentle pop of a cork. A silver tray appears on a side table with 2 tiny glasses, cordials, perhaps. Something sweet and syrupy, meant to be sipped rather than swallowed. You sit down beside your guide on a curved settee that cradles rather than cushions. It makes you lean in, just slightly. Not uncomfortably. Just enough. This, they say, swirling the cordial, is where people came to be heard. Not just seen. You tilt your head. That's unusual, for Versailles. Exactly, they say. Here, words mattered more than appearance. Or at least, they were supposed to. The salon was used for a particular ritual, a kind of game, but not the laughing kind. It was called La Confidence Suspendue, the suspended confidence. A courtier would speak a single confession aloud, and the person listening would respond not with answers, but with reflection. It was intimacy as a mirror. You raise an eyebrow. That doesn't sound very fun. Oh, it wasn't, your companion grins. It was far better. It was honest. And in a palace built on performance, honesty was perhaps the boldest seduction of all. Historians still argue whether the listening room was sanctioned by royal decree, or merely tolerated as a fashionable eccentricity. Some accounts call it the invention of a duchess with no title but a remarkable ear. Others claim it began as a punishment, speak your truth or be barred from the masquerade. You take a sip of the cordial. It tastes of sugared plums and some elusive herb that lingers on the roof of your mouth. Possibly lavender. Possibly regret. Your companion turns toward you, legs drawn up casually on the couch. Would you like to try? Try what? The game. You glance around. No audience. No masquerade. Just you, and them, and the steady thrum of candle flames. All right, you say? I'll go first. You consider. It should be something light. Something that fits the room. Something that would have made a powdered wig lean forward with interest. I once pretended to faint just to avoid dancing the minuet you offer. Your companion laughs softly, then nods solemnly. And what did you hope the feint would accomplish? An exit, you admit? And attention. They swirl their glass. And did it work? You smile. Not exactly. The musician assumed I'd dropped a pin. There's a comfortable pause. Then it's their turn. I once fell in love with someone because of the way they adjusted their glove. You look up. That's all? That's everything, they say. You sip your cordial again. The warmth settles in your chest, not from alcohol, but from the fact that someone just told you the truth. Not a grand truth. Not a dramatic one. Just something quietly real. The room encourages it. There's no clock here. No portraits. No mirrors. Nothing to reflect you back to yourself. Only the other person. You wonder how many confessions were spoken in here over the centuries. How many hearts were not broken but revealed. How many noble affairs were born not of touch, but of being understood. And then you see it, a small book, resting open on a writing desk. You stand and move toward it, half expecting poetry. But the pages are filled with single lines, notes left behind by those who had played the game. I never liked the smell of violets, but I told her I did. He never learned my real name. That was the point. We were both pretending to be braver than we were. You run your finger along the edge of the paper. It feels like pressing against the pulse of history, soft, rhythmic, steady. Your companion appears beside you, reading over your shoulder. I wonder, they murmur, how many of those words were meant to be overheard. You close the book gently. You both sit again. This time, you say nothing. The silence is its own kind of story. And then, from somewhere deep within the walls, music. Just a little. A lone violin, soft and unfinished, as if someone is rehearsing a confession of their own. You don't move. No one does. Because in this room, stillness is not an absence. It's an answer. Finally, your companion leans over, brushing a hand lightly against your sleeve. You've listened well tonight. You nod, unsure what else to do with the weight of those words. As you rise to leave, your eyes land on one last note etched into the wall behind the chaise. You heard me, and I stayed. You don't speak it aloud, but it follows you quietly. All the way to the next door. The next door creaks open without a touch, as if it, too, has been waiting. You step across the threshold and find yourself somewhere utterly unlike the glittering salons and perfumed corridors of before. It's dim here, cozier than candlelit, really. The walls curve inward slightly, like the inside of a velvet-lined jewelry box, and the ceiling is painted a deep twilight blue. Tiny stars are set into it, little gold dots arranged with just enough inaccuracy to make them charming. Welcome, your companion says, to the chamber of delayed good nights. You blink. What was it used for? Exactly what it sounds like, they say, their voice softer now. This was where people lingered. Where they tried to stretch a goodbye into something longer. The room is warm in a different way. Not heated, more like it's been steeped in memories. The chaise lounges are low and overstuffed, perfect for reclining sideways. A fireplace crackles gently, flames licking over half-spent logs as though careful not to disturb the hush. A clock ticks gently from somewhere behind a curtain, but not in a way that urges you forward. No, this room invites dawdling. You settle into a corner seat draped with some impossibly soft brocade. Your guide lowers themselves beside you, not quite touching, but near enough that you feel the comfort of presence. In Versailles, they say, departures were as choreographed as arrivals. A farewell could take an hour. 2, if one was trying to be coy. You glance over. Coy or dramatic? They smile. Yes. Historians still argue whether this chamber was part of the original architectural plans or a later indulgence. Some say it began as a storage space and was slowly transformed by the people who refused to leave. Others insist Louis XIV designed it specifically for romantic exits, the kind with lingering glances and doors that never quite closed. Your guide leans in conspiratorially. There's even a rumor that Marie Antoinette once hid in here during a storm, whispering verses from memory while her hairdressers searched the entire east wing. You imagine her, bare feet tucked under her, curls slightly undone, whispering poetry into a room built for not quite endings. The thought is almost unbearably lovely. On a low table beside you sits a decanter of something golden and thick, possibly elderflower liqueur. 2 crystal glasses. A tiny dish of candied orange peel and pistachios. The kinds of things one would eat slowly, maybe just to have a reason to stay a little longer. Your guide pours for both of you. Did people actually fall in love in here? You ask, taking a sip. The liqueur is sweet, herbaceous, with a warmth that blooms quietly. It lingers, the way memories do in a place like this. They did, they say. Though not always with the person they were supposed to. You both laugh gently. Not mockingly. Just, knowingly. They go on. This was the space where someone might finally say what they'd been holding in during the ball. Or where fingers brushed for just a second longer during a goodbye. The sort of room where silences were rarely accidental. You let that sink in. Somewhere above, in the painted night sky, one of the golden stars seems to twinkle a bit brighter. You suspect it's just the firelight. The room is filled with soft sounds, the fire popping, the gentle tick of the hidden clock, your guide's breathing, and the smallest rustle of fabric as someone shifts their weight ever so slightly closer. You think about everything you've seen tonight, corsets that whispered defiance, fans that fluttered with secret codes, glances exchanged like currency, silences spun into longing. And somehow, this is the place that ties it all together. The final room, where nothing new happens, but where everything feels somehow more real. You run your fingers along the arm of the settee. This place, you murmur, feels like it was meant for stories that don't want to end. Your companion looks at you for a moment. Not searching. Just being with you. Exactly, they whisper. The two of you sit for a long while without speaking. Time drips softly around you, like honey. The flames rise and fall in gentle patterns. You don't feel sleepy, exactly, but more like your thoughts have turned liquid, unhurried. You reach for another piece of candied orange. I think I understand now, you say eventually. Understand what? Why people stayed too long, you reply. Why they needed one last look. One last word. Even if it meant nothing. It always meant something, they say. You look toward the door. It's still open. No one is forcing you to leave. And yet this room, so designed for delays, makes departure feel like the most natural part of staying. You stand, stretching slightly. Your companion rises too, mirroring your slow movements. As you turn to go, they reach out, not to stop you, but to gently place a folded note in your palm. You glance at it. The wax seal is soft rose pink. You raise an eyebrow. You'll know when to read it, they say. You step through the doorway one last time. Not back into a hallway, but into something gentler. Cooler air. Fewer lights. A slow hush settling around everything. Versailles behind you, a quiet future ahead. And in your palm, one unopened whisper still warm. Now, as we drift from candlelit chambers and perfume-laced corridors, let your breath slow, just a little. The footsteps of your mind, once wrapped in silks and powdered games, soften now on mossy cobblestone paths outside the palace. You're no longer laced into court rituals or decoding glances from behind feathered fans. You are simply resting. The fire has long since gone to embers. The corsets have loosened, the ribbons have unknotted, and the distant music has slipped into memory. Even the stars painted on the ceiling have dimmed, their gold catching only the faintest light. Everything in Versailles has exhaled. And so should you. In your hand, that note still rests, unopened, unhurried. It doesn't matter now what it says. The message has already done its work simply by existing. Someone thought of you. That was enough. You lie back now, maybe in your bed, maybe in your imagination, tucked beneath soft linen, listening to the low hum of the night around you. Perhaps you still carry the scent of orange blossom on your sleeve, or the brush of someone's gaze just behind your eyes. It's okay. Let it stay. You don't need to decide anything. You don't need to go anywhere. Just be here, drifting. Every goodbye in Versailles was delayed for a reason. And maybe tonight, you've found your own reason to stay just a little longer in the pause between waking and sleep. So close your eyes. Let the candles burn down. Let the whispers fade. And let the world of silks, secrets, and softly spoken truths carry you into a dream. You're safe here. You're already gone.